Chapter 922. Wang Yinping looked back at him in disbelief. Are you crazy? Or am I crazy? Song Qing shrugged his shoulders. Why do you have this kind of reaction? It's not that this kind of thing is not allowed in the military camp. Even if the military camp allows it. Do you think I will sleep with you? Wang Yinping replied snappily. First, this is not an official march. No one will care about this kind of detail. Second, Song Qing stretched out his second finger. Why won't you sleep with me? Wang Yinping's face suddenly turned cold. Yes, we did have sex. But now I know you are not my brother-in-law. Do you think that just because of that one night, I will be like those Han women who have my body and be loyal to the man who has my body? Because I know that one night is far from enough. So I want to spend a few more nights with you. Our relationship should be able to go one step further. Song Qing said with a smile. Although you are not Han, I am. After that night, I have already regarded you as my woman. Do you still want to deny it? Shameless. Wang Yinping couldn't take it anymore. She whipped his face. Song Qing caught the end of the whip. With a flick of his wrist, Wang Yinping involuntarily fell into his arms. He held her waist to prevent her from falling. Song Qing whispered in her ear, It's not like we haven't fought before. You're clearly not my opponent, but you still take the initiative to fight with me. Are you looking for an excuse to throw yourself into my arms? You. Wang Yinping was about to go crazy. Suddenly Song Qing pressed her lips. Sure. Did you hire a helper? Wang Yinping shook her head blankly. Song Qing took off one of her earrings and turned his head to listen attentively. Suddenly, he raised his hand, and Wang Yinping could not even see the trajectory of the earrings before she heard a muffled groan coming from outside the tent. Then, Song Qing took a step forward and rushed out of the tent. After a few muffled sounds of fists and palms colliding, everything became quiet again. When Song Qing returned to the tent, his hand was on the neck of a masked man. Who is he? Wang Yinping exclaimed. I don't know. Song Qing shook his head. His martial arts seems to be pretty good. Then he pulled off his black cloth. A.C. Wang Yinping was stunned. Great Master Pucha? Pucha Shiji was so ashamed that he wanted to die. He was known as the #1 martial artist in the capital city, just below the Qing kingdom, and he had even looked down on Tang Kuobian's martial arts in front of Wang Yinping in the evening. But now, he was being strangled by his opponent like a chicken. What was even more embarrassing was that he was only able to block 3 moves from his opponent before he was captured. Although he was caught off guard by his opponent's sneak attack, experts fought for the initiative when they fought. How could they fight fair and square like in an arena? Pucha Shiji understood this very well. When the same thing was seen by someone familiar and someone unfamiliar, there would be vastly different reactions. For example, when people like Gubai and the others discovered that Song Qing possessed peerless martial arts, their first reaction was to know that he was an imposter. Pucha Shiji, on the other hand, thought that Tang Kuobian had been biding his time all these years, so he didn't suspect his identity. Ah, so it's young General Pucha. May I know what brings you here so late at night? Song Qing let go of his hand. He had planned to get rid of the man after questioning him, but he didn't expect this person to be Pucha Shiji. His identity was sensitive, and he was the son of Pucha's first wife. This was going to be difficult. Fortunately, he hadn't been here for long, so he probably didn't hear anything he shouldn't have. Pucha Shiji rubbed his neck and panted heavily. At the same time, his face was full of shame and anger. He stammered, I was worried that something might have happened to the princess, so I came to take a look. What could possibly have happened to me? Wang Yinping said angrily. But then she remembered that she had fallen into Song Qing embrace, and she immediately felt guilty. Song Qing immediately understood. Does young general like Ping? Pucha Shiji felt a little uncomfortable hearing him call her so intimately. But when he thought of the other party's martial arts, all that was left was disappointment. That's right, it's a wonderful thing for a gentleman to be in love with a fair and graceful lady, but there's a saying that young general hasn't heard of. It's called fate, and there's no need to force it. From the intelligence gathered in Daxing Constabulary, Pucha Shiji was a decent young man. He didn't have many of the bad habits of the nobles, and he was also an upright person. Song Qingshu didn't want to make things difficult for him. Ping has already clearly rejected you. Why do you still insist on pestering her? Pucha Shiji's face was desolate. After what happened tonight, I don't have the face to pursue the princess anymore. But there's something I have to say, and I hope you won't mind. It doesn't matter. Song Qingshu gestured at him. I know that the princess likes the left minister, but you're already the princess's son-in-law. How will you give the princess happiness in the future? Pucha Shiji stared at him. Before Song Qingshu could reply, Wanyan Ping frowned and said, "This is a matter between him and me. There's no need for an outsider like you to worry about it. Even if brother-in-law can't marry me, I'm willing to be his secret lover." Although she hated Song Qingshu as well, Song Qingshu was much more pleasing to the eye compared to Pucha Shiji, who kept pestering her like a housefly. Pucha Shiji felt as if he had been struck by lightning. He smiled bitterly. So that's how it is. I was rude earlier, princess. I hope the princess won't take it to heart. Watching his figure disappear into the night sky, Song Qingshu couldn't help but say, "Your words are a little too much of a blow to him." Wanyan Ping snorted in annoyance. "If I don't do this, how can I make him give up?" Song Qingshu immediately leaned over and asked, "Then did you mean what you said just now? Don't be so smug." Wanyan Ping hurriedly took a step back. "Even if what I said just now was what I thought, it was directed at my real brother-in-law, not an imposter like you." "I'm not an imposter," Song Qingshu said proudly. "If you don't believe me, you can ask your sister. Although I'm not your ex-brother-in-law, I will be your future brother-in-law." "What ex-brother-in-law, post-brother-in-law, what a mess." Wanyan Ping spat and turned to leave. But in a flash, Song Qingshu was already in front of her. "I won't let you go today. If you leave, I'm afraid I'll really lose you in the future." Song Qingshu looked at her quietly. Seeing that Pucha Shiji couldn't beat him, Wanyan Ping had completely given up on the idea of using force. Moreover, they had a special relationship, so she couldn't call for help and call for help. After hesitating for a long time, Wanyan Ping could only stomp her feet. "I can stay, but I'll sleep on the bed. You sleep on the floor?" "No problem." Song Qingshu's reply was also very straightforward. Chapter 6. Update: the total number of votes for the month was 144, which corresponded to 17 to 18 chapters. There were still about 11 chapters left. Oh my god, everyone is too enthusiastic. There were a total of 8 chapters today, and there were really no more chapters left. The chapters that were lacking would continue to accumulate, so he had to finish them as soon as possible. Tomorrow was the weekend, and he would continue to fight. Chapter 923. Wanyan Ping was immediately dumbfounded. "I said I needed time to think about it." Song Qingshu replied in a muffled voice, "You can also think about it now." Wanyan Ping bit her lip. Why are you so shameless? Although reason told her that she couldn't let him do this, when she thought about how the two of them had already done something 100 times more intimate, her determination to resist wavered. Wanyan Ping's voice trembled as she was distracted by his kiss. "If you don't stop, I'll stab you with a knife. If you really wanted to stab me, you wouldn't have warned me first." Song Qingshu laughed and slid his hand down her thigh. "I remember that your chastity guard is hidden here." Wanyan Ping thought about how she had unreservedly given herself to him under the mountain stream that night. At that time, she had even shyly shown her chastity guard to him. She didn't expect him to remember. She felt her thigh loosen. The small dagger that was wrapped around her had been untied and thrown to the side. Wanyan Ping sighed. "Wait a minute. I'm not used to your appearance. Change back to brother-in-law's appearance. Let's do it again." Song Qingshu laughed. "Fortunately, I'm broad-minded and won't be jealous of your brother-in-law. All right, just you wait." After he finished speaking, he ran over and grabbed the mask on the table. He also extinguished the oil lamp in the tent so that the shadow wouldn't be seen. He didn't mind, but Wanyan Ping was a girl who was thin-skinned. Noticing his careful actions, Wanyan Ping instantly understood what he meant. She couldn't help but sigh. No wonder her sister always said that he was a considerate and gentle man. When he climbed back onto the bed, She didn't say anything and quietly let him press on top of her. After an unknown amount of time, when her hand suddenly touched his face, she found that it was smooth and there was no trace of a beard. She couldn't help but exclaim, "You lied to me." Song Qingshu looked at the mask that he had thrown to the side and smiled proudly. "You have to get used to my current appearance. How about this? If you miss your brother-in-law in the future, I'll pretend to be him to be intimate with you." Why does it sound so weird? You should feel lucky. Marrying me is equivalent to marrying two men. Of course, if you like, I can pretend to be another man. Before he could finish, Wang Yinping punched him. "Go die. You're getting more and more vulgar." Song Qing smiled and didn't say anything else. He hugged her tightly. Only heavy breathing and deliberately suppressed moans could be heard in the tent. Compared to Song Qingshu's Xiao Yao Zizai, Chang Sheng Wang, who was also sent to prison, was not so lucky. Soon, the new chief interrogator followed the instructions of the emperor and Wan Yanliang and tortured Changsheng Prince into confessing. He recorded a confession of rebellion and took the opportunity to arrest all the officials close to Changsheng Prince, including the former inspector of the imperial palace, Wan Yintesi. After reading the confession, the emperor expressionlessly issued a secret edict to kill Changsheng Wang in the imperial prison. The usually spacious Changsheng Prince's mansion had become extremely desolate. The servants and maids had already run away after hearing the news. Only Changsheng Wangfei was left alone in the main hall. More than 10 years of hard work has been destroyed in a day. Does the heavens want our Ming dynasty to end? Tashkis seemed to be in a daze. The three Persian emissaries stood to the side, looking at each other in dismay. They were also dejected. Miaofeng Shi could not help but say, "Tashkis, now is not the time to be lamenting about this. The headquarters is still waiting for our help. We can't just give up like this." Lu Yinshi nodded and said, "That's right. Miaofeng Shi's words make sense." The two of them had lived in Persia for a long time and had always put the interests of the headquarters above all else. Therefore, they were not as dazed as Tashkis. But Tashkis was different. She had lived in the Jin kingdom for a long time. Although she did not fall in love with Changsheng Wang, even a cat and a dog who had lived together for more than 10 years would have some feelings for each other. Moreover, Changsheng Wang had always treated her very well. This time she had to watch him die in the imperial prison without being able to do anything. Her heart was filled with guilt. Hearing their words, Tashkis finally could not help but burst out. "That's easy for you to say. Now that Changsheng Wang is dead, my foundation in the Jin kingdom is gone. What else can I do?" Hui Shi could not help but say, "Isn't the Jin emperor infatuated with you? In my opinion, it would be much more useful to work on him than on that useless Changsheng Wang. Why don't you go and seduce him? If necessary, you can let him take advantage of you. In any case, you are no longer the holy maiden. You don't need to maintain your chastity." Tashkis was so angry that she laughed. "You say it so easily. I don't know if you have become stupid after staying in Persia. Which powerful man in the Central Plains would be easily influenced by a woman? To them, a woman is only a plaything. If I were the empress or even the imperial concubine, it would be easier. At least to a certain extent, I could influence the emperor and befriend foreign ministers. But my current identity is Changsheng Wang's wife, the emperor's sister-in-law. Now that Changsheng Wang has been executed, even if Wan Yinshui were to bring me into the palace, would he dare to risk universal condemnation and give me a public identity? Without a corresponding identity, in everyone's eyes, I'm only a plaything. Which minister would be willing to make friends with me? How could I influence the decisions of the imperial court?" Lu Yunshi's eyes lit up. "Tashkis, your identity is too sensitive. But Hui Shi does not have this problem. Why don't we use your connections to recommend her to the Jin emperor? Although Hui Shi is not as peerless as you, she is still a famous beauty in Persia. Won't it be easy to win the favor of the Jin emperor and obtain a place in the harem? When the time comes, you two will work together. Miaofeng Shi and I will coordinate from the inside and outside. As long as we have control of the palace, we will have half of the success." Hui Shi's countenance changed. "How can we do that? Why not? Tajkis hated Hui Weshur for always pressuring her with righteousness, so she decided to give her a taste of her own medicine. Are you not willing to sacrifice yourself for the headquarters and for the revered Ming? Noticing the unfriendly gazes of the others, Hui Weshur hurriedly said, "Of course, I am willing. However, the effect of fighting for favor in the harem is too slow. The headquarters may not be able to hold out for that long. Why don't we take this opportunity to control the Jin Emperor? As long as we can control him, we can do whatever we want." In order to not lose her virginity to the Jin Emperor, she had racked her brains. Tajkis's eyes lit up. Although she had a personal grudge against Hui Weshur, it was not to the extent of delaying the proper business. Although Hui Weshur's idea was risky, it was effective. "Very well, you can pretend to be my distant cousin. I will recommend you to the Emperor. At the same time, we can take advantage of this opportunity to bring Feng and Yun in. When the Emperor comes to favor you, we will act together. As long as we can quickly eliminate the great Qing kingdom, we can control the Emperor without alarming anyone else." Chapter 924. Song Qingshu's reply was too straightforward, and Wang Yinping felt that there was something fishy going on. But now that things had come to this, she decided to stay with the attitude that she would take things as they came. Now that there are no outsiders, you don't have to use my brother-in-law's face anymore. It looks weird. Every time she saw the face with the curly beard, Wang Yinping felt a sense of familiarity. But once she found out that the brother-in-law was Song Qingshu in disguise, she felt uncomfortable looking at the same face again. "Since Ping doesn't like it, I'll take off my mask." Song Qingshu smiled and took off his mask, revealing his original face. Looking at the young man with sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes, Wang Yinping couldn't help but feel a sense of unfamiliarity. She didn't know what to say. And by female sign, LVP, Song Qingshu, on the other hand, didn't care. He just quietly looked at the beautiful girl in front of him, which was also an extremely pleasant thing to do. After a long time, it was Wang Yinping who could not withstand his fiery gaze. She pointed at the mask on the side and asked, "How did you do it? You look exactly like my brother-in-law. Even my sister and I can't recognize each other." Women were the most meticulous, not to mention two women who had such a close relationship. Wang Yinping had always been brooding over the fact that she had carelessly given her body to this man. "Oh, that. I cut off the skin of Tang Quobian's face to make it," Song Qingshu said casually. "What?" Wang Yinping was shocked and angry. Her hair stood on end, and she unconsciously pulled out her short sword. "Look at how anxious you are. I was just joking with you." Song Qingshu laughed. Wang Yinping felt that the other smile was asking for a beating. She stretched out her hand coldly. "Let me see." She didn't dare to completely trust the other and wanted to confirm it herself before she could be at ease. Song Qingshu tossed the mask to her and said, "Tang Quobian really did ask me to cut off his face before he died so that I could impersonate him. But such a bloody thing doesn't suit my taste, so of course I wouldn't do it." Wang Yinping automatically ignored his chattering, and her fingers gently stroked the mask. This mask was made of a special material and felt exactly like skin. However, she came from the laundry yard, so she could tell the difference between real and fake skin. After confirming that it wasn't her brother-in-law's face, she couldn't help letting out a long sigh of relief. "Tell me about what happened when brother-in-law went to Kaifeng." Although she had heard most of it from her older sister, Wang Yinping still wanted to know how her brother-in-law spent his last moments. "Tang Quobian is lucky to have such a loyal sister-in-law like you." Song Qingshu sighed, then began to talk about the series of events that had happened since he met Tang Quobian. From time to time, Wang Yinping would ask questions, but they were all trivial matters, as if she was trying to recreate Tang Quobian's daily life. Song Qingshu didn't show any signs of impatience and continued to ask questions and answer. In the end, Wang Yinping even knew how many times Tang Quobian had gone to the bathroom during those few days. Only then did she calm down. It was already late at night, and Pucha didn't go far. He was in a corner about 100 feet away, silently enjoying the night breeze, but his heart was even colder than the wind. Years of obsession couldn't be put down so easily. Although he knew that there was no longer any possibility between him and Wang Yinping, he still cared about her. It was a pity that he hadn't seen Wang Yinping come out even after staying here for so long. In his mind, he couldn't help but imagine the scene of her undertang Kuo Bian's body, and he immediately withered. Pucha laughed self-deprecatingly a few times, then got up and left in a desolate manner. At this moment, he had truly come to terms with it. There was an indescribable atmosphere in the tent, and the two of them couldn't find anything else to talk about. It was so quiet that Wang Yinping could even hear her own heart pounding. If he dares to climb onto the bed, I'll stab him. Wang Yinping touched the chastity guard on her thigh, and her nervous heart gradually calmed down. As the saying goes, what you fear will happen. She suddenly felt something strange beside her, and turned around to see Song Qingshu lying beside her, smiling at her. What do you want? Wang Yinping was like a startled rabbit, shrinking to the side. You. Song Qingshu answered straightforwardly. Wang Yinping didn't understand at first, but then she finally understood what he meant. She couldn't help but feel embarrassed and angry. You bastard, get off me. She stretched out her leg to kick him off, but Song Qingshu seized the opportunity to grab her. That night, you were much gentler to me than today. Song Qingshu couldn't help but sigh. In truth, he had always been very conflicted about Wang Yinping. Before, he had deliberately kept a distance from her, and would rather be misunderstood by her than explain himself. He thought that it was better to just get the pain over with and end this fate. But the basis of this was that she didn't know his identity, so he could quietly appear and then quietly leave. But now that she knew the truth, Song Qingshu couldn't be so free and easy. Especially when he saw that brat Pucha GS circling around her, he was very unhappy. Thinking that she might fall into the arms of another man in the future, he felt like he was going to go crazy. Since that was the case, he might as well be the bad guy for once. A man's possessiveness is really a bad thing. Although Song Qingshu understood this, since he couldn't overcome it, he might as well follow his heart's desires. You're not allowed to mention what happened that night again. In the end, women were still soft-hearted. Thinking that the man in front of her was her first and only man, Wang Yinping's mood became very complicated. Song Qingshu just lay down beside her and didn't make any further movements. There's really no need to mention what happened before. Let's discuss how we'll get along in the future. What's there to discuss? Although they had already been intimate with each other, now that their bodies were so close, Wang Yinping still felt nervous all over. I'll tell you what I think first, Song Qingshu said. I don't have any other requests, just one thing, and that is that you can't find another man in this life. Wang Yinping was so angry that she laughed. I can't find another man, but you? Song Qingshu smiled slightly. That's what I mean. Do you have any shame? Wang Yinping was angry. Compared to my face, I'm more willing to have you. Song Qingshu turned sideways and quietly looked in her eyes. The reason why he dared to be so domineering was largely because of Wang Yinping's reaction. After all, when she found out about his identity, her reaction couldn't be considered fierce, so he immediately realized that there might be a chance. Wang Yinping couldn't stand his burning gaze and began to evade it. I need time to think about it. The corners of Song Qingshu's mouth slightly rose. Take your time to think about it. As he spoke, he kissed her smooth neck. Chapter 925. The rest of the people agreed, but they soon realized a key problem. As the #1 expert of the Jin Kingdom, how could the great Qing Kingdom get rid of him silently? Lu Yun said in his broken Chinese, no matter how good the martial arts of the Qing Kingdom are, they can't be better than Zhang Wuji, the leader of the Central Plains Ming Dynasty. If the three of us join forces, even Zhang Wuji is no match for us. What can Emir to Qing Kingdom do? Be that as it may, it is better for us to be cautious. We cannot afford to make any mistakes this time and must succeed in a single strike. Therefore, let us first discuss how we will proceed when the time comes, reminded Tadish. After all, she was the mother of the current hierarch, and what she said was reasonable, so the 3 Persian emissaries did not refute her. They gathered around the table and began to discuss. And P plus or minus. Plus, Wanyan Shui had gotten rid of Changsheng Wang. Thinking that no one would be able to threaten his throne anymore, his mood became very happy. Especially when he thought about how he would be able to have Madame Peach blossom forever in the future, he was so excited that his lower abdomen heated up. He had already sent someone to Changsheng Wangfu to invite Madame Peach Blossom into the palace. At this time, she should be arriving soon. This concubine pays her respects to the emperor. Long live the emperor! While Wanyan Ju was lost in thought, Lady Peach Blossom had already entered and knelt before the prince. "Madam, please get up." Wanyan Rui hurriedly left the throne and ran over to help her up. "Many thanks to your majesty." Tadish lowered her eyelids, concealing any changes in her expression. Wanyan Rui looked at the peerless beauty in front of him and couldn't help but sigh. "Madam has lost weight recently." Tashtish replied with a wooden expression. "I have been running errands for Changsheng Wang all over the place. It's very difficult for me not to reduce it. After all, she and Changsheng Wang have been husband and wife in name for so many years. It was difficult for her not to have a bit of resentment." Wanyan Ju forced a smile and said, "Does Madam blame me for killing Prince Changsheng?" "I dare not." Tadish bowed. Changsheng Wang brought about his own destruction. He can't blame anyone else. Wanyan Shi looked at her suspiciously. "Are you telling the truth, or are you lying? Whether it's true or false, it's all meaningless now." Tadish lifted her head. "Moreover, I know that a large part of the reason why His Majesty is doing this is because of me." Wanyan Shi gazed at her affectionately and said, "Tao Yao, I've wanted you for more than 10 years. I've wanted you for more than 10 years. Every time I thought about the fact that you are the wife of the Changsheng prince, I felt suffocated. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. Even if you resent me or hate me, I must have you. His Majesty has already obtained me." Tadish was referring to the exchange of her body for Changsheng Wang's safety. "It's not enough." Wanyan Ra looked at her with reddened eyes. "We want to have you for myself forever. I won't share it with anyone, even if Changsheng King is your husband." Tadish heaved a faint sigh and said, "So, in the end, it was I who caused Changsheng Wang's death." Wanyan Shi frowned and said, "Tao Yao, do you still not understand? You chose the wrong man back then, which is why you're in this situation today. Are you going to make the same mistake again?" Tadish shook her head and said, "I am no longer the little girl from back then. Only now do I understand that love is useless. If I want to marry, I should marry the strongest man in the world. Only then can I live a happy life." Wanyan, she was overjoyed and said, "Tao Yao, it's good that you understand this. In the entire Jin Kingdom, I am the strongest man. From now on, if you follow me, I guarantee that you will be 1,000 times happier than if you followed Changsheng Wang." "Yes, many thanks for His Majesty's favor." Tadish gracefully bowed, but inwardly she was sneering. Seeing that she was willing to let him do whatever he wanted, Wanyan, she was greatly moved and could not help but open his arms to embrace her. However, given Tadish's martial arts, how could she let herself be hugged by him? With a tap of her foot, her skirt fluttered and she spun to the side. Although her posture was very pleasing to the eye, Wanyan Shi's face sank and he asked, "What? Are you still unwilling?" Tadish saluted before explaining, replying to Your Majesty, "This concubine has been married before and is not as pure as the ladies in the palace. For the sake of not being bullied in the palace, this concubine has decided to recommend cousin's sister to Your Majesty. We sisters will serve Your Majesty together in hopes that Your Majesty will take more pity on us in the future." "You have a cousin?" Wanyan Shi's interest was immediately piqued. "How does she look?" "She is a peerless beauty and will definitely not disappoint Your Majesty. She is currently waiting outside the palace." "Your Majesty, you can summon her in to see for yourself," replied Tadish. "Quick, summon her into the palace." Wanyan Shi thought that since Tao Yao was already a peerless beauty, her cousin's appearance would definitely not be too bad. Even if she was only half as beautiful as Tao Yao, she would still be considered a great beauty. Moreover, the two of them were sisters. TSK, TSK, TSK. Very soon, Hui Wushi was brought into the palace. A palace maid had already inspected her from head to toe. After confirming that she was not carrying any weapons, she was brought to Wan Yanxi. "You new pays her respects to your majesty. Long live your majesty." Unlike the others, Hui Wushi's appearance was the closest to that of the people of the Central Plains. In fact, she looked even more like someone from the Central Plains than Tadish. Only those who were extremely familiar with the western regions would be able to recognize her bloodline from the faint color of her eyes. Other than that, she looked no different from a person from the Central Plains. "You knew? What an interesting name." Wan Yanxi raised her head and saw that she was around 30 years old. She had a head of beautiful black hair and an oval face. "Just now, Tao Yao praised you as a peerless beauty. At first, I didn't think much of it. Now that I have seen you, you are indeed an outstanding beauty." Wan Yanxi's royal countenance immediately brightened. "Many thanks for your praise, your majesty." Even though Hui Wushi had an ulterior motive, she was still somewhat excited to be praised by the emperor, who was used to seeing 3,000 beauties in his harem. Wan Yanxi suddenly thought a question. "You knew. Have you ever been married?" Hui Wushi's face turned slightly red. "I have never been married. You knew is still a virgin." The Persian Ming dynasty was very strict. Although she was the Hui Wushi's emissary, she was also one of the candidates for the position of saintess. Naturally, she had to maintain her virginity. Wan Yanxi frowned. "You're not young anymore, yet you've never been married. Could it be that you have some sort of hidden illness?" In recent years, the Jin kingdom had been deeply assimilated into the Chinese culture. He really couldn't understand why a woman in her 30s was still unmarried. Even on the grasslands, there were very few unmarried women over the age of 30. Yu Nu silently cursed. This emperor of the Jin kingdom was sick. How could he have such a reaction when he heard that she was a virgin? Would he only be happy if she was already married? Seeing this, Tajkis hurriedly explained, "Reporting to your majesty, it's like this. When cousin was young, a wandering Taoist came to our house. When he saw cousin, he turned pale with fright and declared that cousin's fate was indescribably noble and that only men with the blood of the true dragon could approach her body. Other men would not be able to enjoy it. Later on, this rumor spread and no one in the surrounding villages dared to propose marriage. It was only recently that I received news of her whereabouts and specially invited her over to serve your majesty. So that's how it is." Wan Yin, she was overjoyed. "It seems that you are fated to wait for me to take your virginity." Chapter 7, the total number of votes now is 1609, corresponding to 21. Chapter 926. Genius 1, second remember if you want to go. Talk, net, providing you with wonderful novels to read. Moon Slave was inwardly furious, but she had no choice but to put on a bashful expression. Tadish, who was standing to the side, revealed a strange expression. This woman really knows how to act. Sure enough, when Wan Yanxue saw her expression, he could not restrain his appetite. He walked over and pulled her with one hand and Tajkis with the other, walking toward the dragon bed. "We are especially happy today. I want you two sisters to serve us well." Wan Yanshue's face was full of excitement. He didn't notice that the two women beside him were secretly exchanging glances, their eyes filled with murderous intent. At this moment, De Xinghua, who was standing at the door, suddenly said, "Reporting to your majesty, I'm afraid this is somewhat inappropriate. There were rather strict rules regarding betting in the palace. According to the plan, he was supposed to spend the night at another concubine's place. Even if he didn't go, it wouldn't be a big deal to rest in the Hall of Benevolence. However, he was being absurd with two other women. If word got out, the imperial family's reputation would be somewhat tarnished, especially when one of the women was the emperor's sister-in-law. If we say it's reasonable, then it's reasonable." Wan Yanxue glared at De Xinghua with dissatisfaction. However, he also understood what the other party was worried about. After thinking for a moment, he added, "Have the surrounding people withdraw. Bring a few reliable people with you to stand guard outside, lest too many people leak any information. Love go little say, net ku, as your majesty commands." Xingwa replied helplessly. However, regardless of whether it was Wang Yinshui or him, they weren't worried about any safety issues. After all, this was the emperor's bedchamber, the center of the entire palace. There were layers of defenses outside, so it would be strange if an assassin could enter. Moreover, with him standing guard here, it was even more guaranteed that nothing would go wrong. Tadish and Huiwesher looked at each other and saw the joy in each other's eyes. According to their original plan, the final success rate was only 50-50. Apart from Xingwa, the biggest problem was the other unrelated people. They couldn't guarantee that they would be able to capture everyone in one fell swoop. If even one of them escaped, all would be for naught. Who would have thought that they would voluntarily dismiss the palace maids, eunuchs, and guards? Before he left, for some reason, Xingwa felt a little uneasy. He could not help but turn around and say, "Your Majesty, to have both of you serve me at the same time. This is too harmful to your body. Why don't you let Moon Slave or Lady Peach Blossom serve me tomorrow?" Although he was a eunuch, his knowledge was no less than that of a man's. He roughly glanced at the two women and saw that they had peach blossoms on their cheeks, slender waists, and perky buttocks. It was clear that they had an inner seductive body, not to mention that they were in their prime. Even if he was a strong man, it would be difficult for him to deal with one of these women, let alone two at the same time. He was very familiar with Wang Rui's body condition. When he thought of this, he couldn't help but break out in cold sweat. Upon hearing this, Wang Rui flew into a rage. "You damned old dog, I know what I'm doing. Why do I need you to meddle in other people's business? Get lost. You know your limits, my ass." Xingwa wanted to scold him, but he could only think about it. The only thing he could do was smile awkwardly and leave. Yes. This servant will go out now." Because of the awkwardness just now, Wang Rui had already indicated for the two women to wait for him on the dragon bed. After Xingwa left and closed the door, he anxiously walked towards the dragon bed. As he rubbed his hands, he chuckled. "Two beauties, I'm coming," hearing the faint sounds coming from inside the room. Xingwa couldn't help but shake his head. He thought, not without malice, that with the emperor's extremely weak body, how could he deal with the two women? In the end, he could only use his hands. However, this matter concerned a man's dignity. Even the emperor was no exception. Xingwa wasn't interested in being unlucky, so he dozed off outside the door. Suddenly, a cry of alarm came from inside the room. Xingwa's half-closed eyes suddenly opened and emitted a bright light. In an instant, he rushed in. At the same time, he didn't forget to order the guards outside to temporarily stay where they were. Who knew what was going on inside? If Wang Rui's embarrassing side was seen by the guards, it wouldn't be funny. In any case, with his martial arts skills, he was more than capable of dealing with anything. Rushing to the dragon bed, he saw the two women's robes half undone, tightly holding onto the brocade quilt to cover their vital parts. Large areas of their dazzling snow-white skin were exposed to the air. Looking at their curvaceous curves, even though Xingwa had been deprived of power for many years, he almost had a nosebleed when he saw this scene. What exactly happened? When Xingwa's gaze fell on Wang Rui, he couldn't help but sternly shout. It turned out that Wang Rui was currently lying on the bed, foaming at the mouth and twitching nonstop. I also don't know. Just now, His Majesty was about to pamper me, when suddenly, this happened. Huiwesher's timidity and fear were displayed to the fullest. Even Tajtish, who knew the inside story, couldn't find any flaws in it. Xingwa swept his gaze over Wang Rui's body and was suddenly shocked. At this moment, Wang Rui's penis was even smaller than an infant's. He couldn't help but blurt out, shrinking Yang into the abdomen, "Wind on horseback." He immediately felt relieved. Wang Rui's body must have been too weak, and he wanted to force himself on the two women, thus triggering this emergency. Although this illness was frightening, there was a way to cure it. That was to use silver needles to pierce the Changxiang acupoint near the 5 grains reincarnation gate to stimulate his recovery. The Xingwa instructed, "Turn His Majesty over and have him lie face down on the bed." Although he didn't have silver needles, he could condense his qi into needles and the effect wouldn't be any different. He stretched out his finger and quickly pressed on Wanyan Rui's Changxiang acupoint. Seeing Wanyan Rui's body gradually relax, he couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief. At this moment, Deshing was suddenly felt a sharp pain coming from the side of his neck. In an instant, half of his body felt slightly numb. His heart couldn't help but sink, knowing that the opponent's weapon was smeared with a deadly poison. He hurriedly slapped his palm to the side. Hui Wushi let out a muffled groan and held her arm as she retreated. His many years of vigilance allowed him to instantly understand that this was a meticulously planned murder. At this moment, his first reaction wasn't to attack the enemy, but to open his mouth and shout. He knew what his advantage was. As long as the Imperial bodyguards outside came in, he would be in an invincible position. At that time, it wouldn't be too late to slowly deal with the other party. Unfortunately, just as he opened his mouth, he was greeted by a puff of pink smoke. He immediately felt dizzy and his expression finally changed. This was because he clearly saw that the person who had puffed out the smoke was Madame Peach Blossom. Madame Peach Blossom also knows martial arts. A question flashed through Deshing's mind. However, as an expert, he instinctively raised his hand to defend against the opponent's next attack. Unfortunately, because he had successively been poisoned, his movements were slightly slower. Tajtish and Hui Wushi had been prepared for a long time. How could they let go of such an opportunity? In an instant, they stabbed their nails into his throat. Chapter 8 more. Chapter 9:27. At the last moment of his life, Daxing finally solved a question that had been bothering him for a long time. When they entered the palace, they had been searched. Where did the weapons come from? It turned out that it was the bright red fingernails on their slender, jade-like hands. Usually, they were tender and alluring, beautiful and alluring, but at the critical moment, they were lethal. Deshing was very unwilling to accept the fact that he, who was known as the #1 master of the Jin Kingdom, had died in the hands of 2 women. He tried to drag at least one of them down with him. Unfortunately, his eyelids were getting heavier and his hands were not listening to him. Pucci. He saw Hui Wushi raise her left hand, and a stream of Yin energy, like a knife, a sword, a dagger, or a chisel, pierced the Jade Hall acupoint on his chest. Deshing's last shred of vitality was finally extinguished. And sent, male sign. Plus P. Tatish's pupils shrunk as she expressionlessly said, "It seems like your sinister wind blade has improved by quite a bit." Hui Wushi did not notice the meaning in her tone. She just held her right hand and looked at Deshing with lingering fear. This eunuch is really powerful. Just now I used the bone-piercing needle technique to inject the poison from my fingernails into his body, but he was still able to break my arm with one palm strike. In the end, Tatish dispelled the thought of attacking emissary Hui Wei. She heaved a long sigh and said, "That's right. Fortunately, we didn't choose to clash head-on with him. Otherwise, who knows how many of us would have survived." Originally, according to the 3 emissaries' thinking, no matter how high Deshing's martial arts skill was, it was impossible for him to surpass Zhang Wuji, who had mastered the Jiuyang Shengong, Qiankun Nua, Taiji sword, and Jiuyang Shengong. The 3 of them joining hands would be more than enough to deal with him. However, Tajtish vehemently opposed the idea. She believed that the movement would be too big and would easily alert other people in the palace. Moreover, for experts of Deshing's level, it would be easy to defeat him, but it would be too difficult to kill him without a sound. After all, the Persian Ming dynasty similarly had 1,000 years of tradition and experience of assassins. After a thorough discussion, they felt that Tajtish's worries were very reasonable. Finally, they unanimously decided to abandon the plan of a 4-man encirclement. Instead, they dispatched Tajtish and Hui Wushi to execute the mission. This way, it might seem like the power was weakened, but that was not actually the case. In terms of assassination, a woman's innate advantage was not small. Firstly, they could make full use of their beauty. Secondly, they could make the enemy lower their guard and find an opportunity to strike. The principle of the Persian headquarters assassination was that once they made a move, life and death would be decided. The two women first restrained Wanyan Shui and then used a special technique to make him gain the wind on his horse, distracting the attention of the Dexing kingdom. The moment the Dexing kingdom was about to rescue the emperor, they made their move. Together with the poison, they succeeded in killing him in a very short time. It must be known that in terms of real martial art, Tajkis and Hui Weshi combined would be far from being Dexing's match. After resting for a while, the two women put on their clothes again, and then they summoned the imperial bodyguards outside and killed them one by one. After that, Hui Weshi changed into a eunuch's clothes and took the emperor's golden medallion to fetch Lu Yunshi and Miaofeng Shi, who had been waiting outside the palace all along. Tajkis stayed behind to dispose of the corpses in the room. Although her appearance was as beautiful as a peach blossom, with a delicate and weak appearance, she was also Zishan Long Wang and Jinhua Popo, who had killed people like Scything Flax and Jianghu. Naturally, it was not a problem for her to dispose of the corpses. By the time the Persian three emissaries returned with their trusted subordinates, Tajkis had already taken care of everything. She ordered her subordinates to change into imperial bodyguards' clothes and stand guard outside. As for the problem of their appearance, there was no need to worry. Every day in the imperial palace, many people died mysteriously. Changing several imperial bodyguards was not a big deal at all. On the contrary, the Dexing kingdom was a bit troublesome. However, when the time came, there would always be a way to muddle through. As for Wanyan Shui, he had already fainted and was thrown on the bed. Nobody cared about him. After the three emissaries entered the room, they rummaged through the drawers and cabinets, but they did not find what they were looking for. Lu Yunshi looked at Tajkis and asked, "Where is the emperor's tiger seal?" Tajkis was also startled. "You didn't find it?" Seeing the three of them staring at her, she was immediately angered. "What do you mean by looking at me like that? Are you suspecting that I have hidden it?" Miaofeng Shi laughed mischievously and said, "Just now, there were only you and Hui Weshi here. Since Hui Weshi came out to receive us, naturally we can rule out the possibility that you were the only one here. If we don't suspect you, who else would we suspect?" Tajkis snorted and said, "Just now I was half dead from handling so many corpses. How could I have the time to look for the tiger seal? Besides, what good would it do me to hide the tiger seal? Right now, the cult leader of the main altar is my daughter. Do you think I would deliberately pull her back?" The three emissaries looked at each other. They felt that Tajkis's words were very reasonable. They could not help but hesitate and asked, "Then where did the tiger seal go?" Tajkis pointed to Wanyan Shui, who was lying on the bed, and said, "Can't we just ask him?" Wanyan Shui had a wonderful dream. In the dream, he held Madame Peach Blossom in his left hand and Yunu in his right. They did some shameless things on the dragon bed. What made him even more delighted was that he felt as if he had suddenly returned to his youth. That surging and boundless energy, that never-tiring toughness, and the two girls gazing at him with starry eyes. How many years has it been since he experienced such a feeling of pride and satisfaction? However, just as he was about to raise his spear and get on the bed again, the runes suddenly started to rain. He immediately became furious and said, "My bedchamber is leaking. When I find out who is responsible for this, I will definitely execute 9 generations of his family." The rain became heavier and heavier. Finally, the heavy downpour directly drenched his face. He immediately got up and woke up. There was no rain, and there were only a few people surrounding him. Wanyan Shui's head was still somewhat dizzy. When he saw Tajkis, he could not help but reach out to hug her and said, "My beloved concubine, slap." In response to him was a crisp slap. Wanyan Shui was stunned. It had been a long time since he had been slapped. Ever since he became the emperor, no one had dared to disobey him, let alone hit him. Now, he was actually slapped by a woman. Even if the other party was the calamitous Madame Peach Blossom, it was still unacceptable. "Men, drag this woman away and behead her." However, after calling out 3 times, he did not see a single person. He finally realized that something was wrong. Only then did he see Lu Yunshi and Miaofeng Shi. His expression changed, and he said, "Who are you people? How dare you trespass into my bedchamber?" Don't you know that this is a crime worthy of 9 generations of your family being executed? In response to him was a slap from Miaofeng Shi. Miaofeng Shi frowned and looked at him. He could not help but say, Tajkis, did you use too much medicine? Did you make this dog emperor stupid? Tajkis coldly said, he is not smart to begin with. Wan Yin Shui immediately felt a chill run down his spine. He hurriedly shouted, where is the Xing kingdom? The Xing kingdom, where is this dog slave? Shut up. Tajkis gave him another slap. Her depressed mood because of the ever-victorious king finally eased a little. That eunuch is already on the road to the Yellow Springs. If you miss him so much, I can send you down to reunite with him. Chapter 928. After all, Wanyan Rui was the emperor. After his initial panic, he quickly regained his composure and stared fixedly at Tadish. Who are you? Tadish smiled sweetly and gently lifted her hair. Am I not the Lady Peach Blossom that you yearn for day and night? Her face, which he usually thought was peerlessly beautiful, now caused his hair to stand on end. Wanyan Rui subconsciously shook his head. No, you're not Tao Yao. Of course I am Tao Yao. However, I have another identity. I'm the Ming Dynasty's Purple Dragon Queen. Thinking back to how she had no choice but to curry favor with him in the past, Tadish felt the thrill of revenge. Purple Dragon Queen? Wanyan, she silently muttered the name Zishan Long Wang. It was a pity that although Zishan Long Wang was considered a first-class character in Jianghu, in the eyes of the people of the imperial court, he was nothing more than a commoner. He had never heard of this name before. Miaofeng Shi coughed heavily. Tadish, get to the point. Tadish blushed slightly and asked, where did you put your tiger tally? Tiger tally? Wanyan Rui's heart stirred. He suppressed the urge to look in a certain direction. Wasn't the tiger tally always in the cabinet in the bedchamber? Since they have taken control of this place, they should have obtained it. Why are they asking me? A person's potential is limitless in a desperate situation. Although Wanyan Rui was usually muddle-headed, he was more clear-headed than ever when his life was at stake. Since they are asking me this, it proves that they haven't found it. It seems that the tiger tally has been lost. Normally, losing the tiger tally would be a big deal. But now it looks like it's a good thing. Wanyan Rui quickly organized his thoughts and suddenly had an idea. Do you think we would be stupid enough to tell you? Wanyan Rui deliberately snorted. His actions clearly indicated that he had hidden the tiger tally in a safe place. If he didn't tell them, none of them would be able to find it. Use torture. Lu Yinshi was also very direct. The Persian Ming dynasty was good at assassinations and was very familiar with the human body structure. They also had a very deep understanding of the art of torture. Even trained death warriors could not withstand their techniques, let alone a pampered emperor. How dare you? I am a son of heaven. How dare you torture me? Wanyan Rui's expression immediately changed. However, his tone revealed that he was putting on a brave front. You're only our prisoner right now. Why are you putting on the airs of an emperor? Miaofeng Shi mocked. Wanyan Ju's countenance changed several times. Just a moment ago, he had been trying his best to straighten his back, but now he seemed to have deflated and collapsed. Suddenly, he thought of something and hastily said to Tajtish, Tao Yao, as the saying goes, a day as husband and wife means 100 days of devotion. It's not just one day between us. Don't tell me you have a heart to see me being tormented like this. Tajtish sneered and said, do you really think I was the one accompanying you on those occasions? I just used some knockout drugs to make you have some beautiful dreams. Even Changshan King has never been close to me, let alone you. What? Wanyan Rui became absent-minded. So I never had this woman? All those beautiful memories were just a dream? This blow was no less than when he first discovered that he had been reduced to a prisoner. He was completely dumbfounded. At this moment, an imperial guard suddenly came in and reported, Her Majesty the Empress has arrived and wishes to see your Majesty. I won't see her. Send her away. Tajtish frowned. What would happen if the Empress were to see them? When Wanyan Rui heard that the Empress had arrived, he normally disliked this overbearing woman. However, at this moment, it was as if he had seen his savior. He opened his mouth and shouted, Your Majesty." Unfortunately, Hui Wesher, who had been by his side all along, was already prepared. Before he could shout, she had already sealed his mute acupoint. Why has the Empress come to see him at this time? Miaofengshi looked at Tajtish with a puzzled expression. I'm not sure either. Tajtish shook her head. Wanyan Rue and the Empress have never gotten along. During my stay in the palace, I haven't seen them interact much. It is indeed strange for the Empress to come at this time. It can't be that our matter has been exposed, right? Hui Wesher couldn't help but ask. It shouldn't be. Tajtish pondered for a moment before replying. Our operation this time was sudden, and we didn't let anyone live. It is impossible for her to know. At this moment, a commotion suddenly came from outside the hall. One of their trusted aides had already reported. The Empress insisted on barging in. We didn't dare to stop her. As the other party was the Empress, they felt somewhat guilty for pretending to be Imperial Guards. Moreover, even if they were real Imperial Guards, they wouldn't dare to stop her. After all, this was a family matter of the Son of Heaven. Those fake Imperial Guards had a guilty conscience, and in the end, they were muddle-headed and allowed the Empress to enter. I heard that His Majesty invited sister-in-law to the palace tonight. As sister-in-law, I came to take a look. Empress Peiman's words came to an abrupt halt. Seeing the chaotic situation in the hall, she couldn't help but stare blankly. Who are you? Miaofengshi and Lu Yunshi glanced at each other before stepping out at the same time. Before Empress Peiman could react, the eunuchs and palace maids behind her were all slaughtered. Upon receiving the order, the Imperial Guards outside also took the opportunity to kill all of Empress Peiman's palace maids and Imperial Guards outside. Empress Peiman finally reacted. There's a thorn. Unfortunately, the moment she spoke, her mute acupoint was sealed by Tajtish. Looking at the luxuriously dressed woman before her, Tajtish laughed. I was still thinking about how to control the Hall of Peace. I didn't expect you to deliver yourself to my doorstep. Ask her if the tiger tally is with her, reminded Hui Wesher. After all, not just anyone could enter the Emperor's bedchamber. As the Empress, Peiman indeed had the opportunity to take the tiger tally. Tajtish nodded and casually unsealed Empress Peiman's acupoint, who knew that the moment the other party was freed, she would start cursing loudly. Tao Yao, you slut. You actually colluded with thieves to rebel? Because Wanyan Ruo had always liked Tao Yao, she hadn't felt the slightest bit of love from Wanyan Ruo ever since she married him. Naturally, she hated the instigator to the bone. Today's situation only added fuel to the fire. Shut up. Your and the Dog Emperor's lives are now in my hands. If you want to live, answer my questions properly. Tajtish didn't have the energy to argue with her, and coldly said, Are you very pleased with yourself? A strange smile appeared on Empress Peiman's face. Do you feel that the Imperial Palace is under your control? What do you mean? Tajtish immediately felt a sense of foreboding. You'll know soon enough. Slut, don't you always brag about your beauty? When the time comes, this Empress will throw you into a brothel and let you suffer the abuse of thousands of men. Then, I'll execute you with 1,000 cuts, said Empress Peiman through gritted teeth. At this moment, a loud and clear voice came from outside. Your subject, Wanyan Liang, requests an audience with your majesty. Chapter 9:29. At this moment, Tajtish's countenance finally changed. The three Persian emissaries looked at each other in dismay and hastily asked, Why is he here? They could not help but feel puzzled. It was the middle of the night, and the gates of the imperial palace were closed. No one was allowed to enter or leave unless they had the emperor's gold medallion. Although Wanyan Liang was favored by the emperor, he was still a foreign subject. How could he appear outside the emperor's bedchamber in the middle of the night? Wanyan Ting also had the same doubts. However, the most important thing at the moment was to escape from the clutches of these villains. As for Wanyan Liang's crime of breaking into the palace in the middle of the night, it could be investigated at a later time. Stop him outside and don't let him in. Tajtish hastily ordered her subordinates to deal with the situation. At the same time, she was extremely depressed. Ever since she returned to the Central Plains, everything had gone wrong. Today, she was so close to success, Yet so many accidents happen one after another. Suddenly thinking of something, Tish turned to Empress Pei Man and asked, "Did you know that Wan Yin Liang was coming?" Empress Pei Man sneered. "Slut, are you afraid now? If you obediently let me go now, I might consider sparing your life." Tish's countenance turned cold. Just as she was about to fly into a rage, the sound of weapons clashing was suddenly heard from outside the hall, mixed with the screams of many people. The three Persian emissaries and Tish looked at each other with unsightly countenances. They could tell that the screams came from their trusted subordinates. Soon, the group of subordinates retreated into the hall in panic. Wan Yinliang walked in, escorted by a group of people. After taking a glance at the situation in the hall, he roughly understood the situation. "I was wondering why the guards of the Hall of Benevolence were changed today. It turns out that you are the culprit." The three Persian emissaries subconsciously walked to Tish's side and looked at the incoming group of people with vigilance. Tish had mingled with the upper echelons of the Jin Kingdom for a long time and could roughly recognize the people around Wan Yinliang. The person closest to Wan Yinliang was Wan Yinliang's most trusted aide, the Assistant Minister of War, Xiao Yu. Next to him was the Right Deputy Inspector, Pu Cha, who had brought a few dozen trusted Imperial bodyguards with him. Although the number of Imperial bodyguards was small, it was obvious that they were all skilled fighters. There were also 3 burly men guarding Wan Yinliang in the middle. Although Tish had never seen them before, she could roughly guess their identities. They were most likely Wan Yinliang's 4 personal guards, 2 Donjin, 2 Dali, 2 Chihu, Xiao Tonggu, and Yelu Yuani. However, for some reason, there were only 3 of them. He didn't know which of the 4 wasn't present. On the other side stood 3 elderly men. Although they didn't look as valiant as the others and appeared rather old, they faintly exuded the unique prestige and imposing aura of a grandmaster, causing Tish and the others to feel the greatest apprehension. Standing at the head of the group was a tall old man dressed in white. He had a high nose and deep eyes. His face was yellowish-brown, and he exuded a heroic spirit. His eyes were as sharp as swords. Back in the western regions, Tish had met him once and recognized him as the master of White Camel Mountain, Western Poison, Ouyang Feng. The other person wasn't that old. He was dressed in a sapphire blue satin robe. He had a handsome face and a natural and unrestrained manner. His upper lip and chin were slightly pursed. He should have been an extremely refined man, but unfortunately, he was blind in one eye. The black eye patch made him look even more sinister and ruthless. Looking at the 2 golden sabers and black sword on his back, Tish could roughly guess his identity. He was the master of Unrequited Love Valley, Gongsun Ji. In that case, the remaining old man should be the Iron Palm Drifter, Qiu Qianren. The news of Wan Yinliang, the Prince of Sea Mausoleum, recruiting several famous Jianghu experts had spread far and wide in the capital. Tish had also heard about it. "Prince of Sea Mausoleum, quickly come and save me." Wan Yinling quickly called out, while Huiwei emissary's attention was on the other side. Wan Yinliang's eyes flashed with a trace of ridicule, but he still replied, "Your Majesty, don't panic. Wait for this prince to capture these rebels first." Tish sneered, "Prince of Sea Mausoleum, we are all straightforward people and don't resort to insinuations. You have brought your troops to the Emperor's bedchamber so late at night. It is still uncertain who is the rebel." After hearing her words, Wan Yinling's eyes turned doubtful. Wan Yinliang smiled unhurriedly. "This prince has obtained reliable information and knows that there is a change in the Hall of Benevolence. Therefore, I have brought my troops to rescue the Emperor. What is wrong with that? On the other hand, you, Madam Peach Blossom, have truly exceeded this prince's expectations. I didn't expect you to have so many experts under you. You were able to silently control the Emperor. Admirable, truly admirable." At this moment, Ouyang Feng spoke. "If I didn't recognize wrongly, this Madam Peach Blossom should be the head of the 4 great law kings under the former Ming Dynasty cult master Yongding Tian, Zishan Dragon King." "Zishan Dragon King?" Wan Yinliang revealed a strange expression. It is said that Zishan Dragon King was the #1 beauty in the martial arts world. I didn't expect her to come to the Jin Kingdom and become the ever-victorious princess. Wang Yanliang was different from Wang Yanling. These years, he had been paying more attention to the martial arts world, especially those famous chivalrous women and beauties like Huang Rong and Zishan Dragon King. Wang Yanliang looked at Tajtish with a playful expression. Isn't the Ming dynasty's power in the western region? Why do you suddenly want to encroach on the Jin Kingdom's court? Tajtish weighed the strength of both sides in her heart. It was obvious that her side situation was not optimistic. It seemed that she could only win with her wits and not force. Thinking of this, she smiled sweetly. Prince Hailing, you misunderstand. This time, we came to the Jin Kingdom to seek cooperation with your country. We definitely have no intention of encroaching on it. Tajtish was already a beauty that could cause the downfall of a country. Her sweet smile made her look even more beautiful. The surrounding soldiers' breathing quickened. Among the people present, only Ouyang Feng and Qiu Qianren were not affected. Firstly, their cultivation levels were high, and secondly, they were old. In addition, they were not fond of women to begin with. Therefore, when faced with Tajtish's peerless beauty, their minds were as calm as an ancient well. As for Gong Sunji, who was also a top-notch expert, he was just like Wang Yanliang, drooling. After all, Wang Yanliang was used to seeing beauties. In this aspect, his resistance was slightly higher. He forcefully sobered up and said, Madam's words are a little funny. Madam has taken my country's emperor and empress hostage. How can you talk about cooperation like this? Tajtish seemed to have anticipated his question. Unhurriedly, she explained, Your servant has been in your country for many years. I understand that Wang Yanling is muddle-headed and incompetent. He is not a partner worthy of the Ming dynasty's reliance. In comparison, Your Excellency is wise and brilliant. Our Ming dynasty has decided to cooperate with Your Highness. Unfortunately, we do not have a suitable gift for our first meeting. After much deliberation, we decided to use the Emperor and Empress to show our sincerity. Who would have known that before we could present them, Your Highness would arrive? Chapter 930. Wang Yanliang laughed. Is that true? Tajkis bowed. What I have said is true. After spending so many years in the upper echelons of power in the Jin Kingdom, her vision was no longer that of a young girl who would disregard everything for love. In a short period of time, she had already understood the situation. Wang Yanliang had obviously come prepared. Although the Persian 3 emissaries were highly skilled, if both sides were to fight, they would definitely be annihilated. Since it was impossible to control Wang Yanrui, it was better to take a step back and cooperate with Wang Yanliang while they still had the capital to negotiate. If she could successfully build a relationship with Wang Yanliang, it would be a blessing in disguise. After all, for what she had seen and heard over the years, Wang Yanliang was a staunch supporter of war in the Jin court. Moreover, he had always viewed the Mongols as the greatest threat. When the time came, she could provoke him and incite a war between the Jin and the Mongols. That would be considered as having accomplished her mission. The reason why Tajtish felt that negotiation was feasible was because even though her side was in a disadvantageous position, they were still a force that couldn't be underestimated. If Wang Yanliang truly wished to devour them, he would have to pay an exorbitant price. To Wang Yanliang, every ounce of strength was extremely precious. Madam's proposal is very interesting. Wang Yanliang smiled. Since that is the case, to show your sincerity, can you first send the Emperor and Empress over? Hui Yushur hurriedly stepped forward and whispered to Tajkis, No, the Emperor and Empress are our only bargaining chips. How can we hand them over to him? Tajkis frowned. After a long time, she said, The Emperor and Empress are of no use to us. I know Wang Yanliang very well. He is not a loyal subject. This time, he brought troops in the middle of the night, not to save the Emperor. Miaofeng Shi and Lu Yinshi agreed. Just hand the Emperor and Empress over to him. Tajkis then said in a clear voice, Since your Highness has spoken, to show our sincerity, we will immediately send them over. She signaled with her eyes, and her subordinates escorted Wanyan Rui and Empress Pei Man to the side. Prince hailing, help us kill these rebels, and we will bestow you the title of minister. Seeing Wan Yinliang, Wanyan Rui felt as if he had seen his savior. All these years, he had trusted Wan Yinliang greatly. Now that he had returned to his side, his heart, which had been restless the entire night, finally calmed down. Hearing his order, Wan Yinliang immediately smiled, but he did not immediately respond. Instead, he walked to his side, and under the other party's astonished gaze, he reached out and broke his neck. Bandits from the Ming dynasty snuck into the imperial palace to assassinate the emperor. Unfortunately, the emperor has passed away. He has ordered the guards to kill the bandits on the spot. Wan Yinliang's emotionless voice reverberated throughout the hall. Although Tashtish's plan was perfect, and if it was any other day, Wan Yinliang might really be persuaded by her. However, this time, it concerned the emperor. He had entered the palace with the intention of assassinating the emperor and usurping the throne. Just as he was vexed over how to deal with the infamy, the people of the Ming dynasty happened to bump into the muzzle of his spear. This kind of scapegoat delivered to his doorstep, it would be a waste not to make use of it. Tashtish and the others were both shocked and angry, but they no longer had the time to criticize them. Wan Yinliang's subordinates received their orders and charged towards them. Ouyang Feng took the lead and went against Miaofeng Shi, while Qiu Qianren chose Lu Yanshi. As for Gong Sunji, he had long coveted Hui Weishi's slender waist and perky bottom. Without any hesitation, he chose her. Pucha and a hoodie led the guards to kill the remaining bandits. Although Empress Pei Man no longer had any feelings for Wanyan Rui, he was still her husband. Seeing him die just like that, she could not help but feel sad. However, at this moment, she was even more shocked and angry. Wan Yinliang, you dared to assassinate the emperor. Wan Yinliang smiled. Empress, you misunderstand. The emperor died at the hands of these bandits from the Ming dynasty. I am currently avenging the emperor. Empress Pei Man berated him. These lies can only be used to deceive the ignorant commoners. Since you dared to assassinate the emperor, I believe that you will not be lenient towards me, the empress. Wan Yinliang greedily glanced at her voluptuous body. Your Highness is worrying too much. This prince has no use for Wanyan Rui. However, your Highness is different. At the very least, your Highness is a charming beauty. Shameless. Empress Pei Man was so angry that her whole body trembled. Wan Yinliang, don't be too pleased with yourself. Someone will definitely come and deal with you. You mean Wanyan Zongxian, Zongmin, and those old farts? Hee, when this prince is done here, the first person I will deal with will be those old farts. These past few years, both Wanyan Zongxian and Zongmin have been above Wan Yinliang in terms of status and seniority. Wan Yinliang also knew that after he usurped the throne, other people would be fine, but these two leaders of the military and the government would definitely not obey him. They had the military and power in their hands, and at the same time, they had great prestige. Once they raised their arms, he would be in a dangerous situation. So after he took control of the palace, the first thing he would do was to get rid of these two people. Empress Pei Man laughed coldly and did not refute him. However, the figure of another person appeared in her mind. Tashtish glanced over at the Persian three emissaries and found that they were all at a disadvantage. She knew that it would be difficult for them to escape today. Her only chance was to capture the ringleader first. Having made up her mind, she consecutively used her killing moves to kill the guards in front of her. Then, using her lightness skill, she rapidly approached Wan Yinliang. Along the way, the guards tried to stop her, but unfortunately, there was an indescribable strangeness to her movements. She was like a ghost or a demon, a spirit or a monster. After a few leaps, she appeared in front of Wan Yinliang. Wan Yinliang's expression changed slightly, and he hastily retreated. However, Tashtish was betting on this slim chance of survival. How could she let him go so easily? She stretched out her hand to grab the major acupoint on his chest. Just as Wan Yinliang was about to be caught, Two large hands suddenly reached out from the side, blocking in front of them. It turned out that Wan Yinliang's 4 personal guards had made a move. Xiao Tonggu and Yelu Yuni blocked Tadish's attack, while Ali Chu stayed by Wan Yinliang's side. Wan Yinliang's 4 bodyguards were carefully selected top experts in the country. If they were to appear in Jianghu, each one of them would be as famous as Zishan Dragon Queen. Moreover, half of Tashtish's kung fu was related to underwater kung fu. Fighting 1 against 2, she quickly fell into a disadvantageous position. Tashtish clenched her teeth. She raised her hand and threw her famous concealed weapon, the golden flower, towards the 2 bodyguards. She tried to seize this opportunity to escape. The result was that the 2 bodyguards dodged to the east and swayed to the west, completely avoiding the projectiles. Xiao Tonggu continued to press forward, his finger pointed at Tashtish's throat. Tashtish hastily raised her palm to block in front of her body. At the same time, she brandished her sword to counterattack. Unexpectedly, she suddenly leaped up. Yelu Yuni had already grabbed her from behind. Xiao Tonggu took this opportunity to rush forward 3 steps and sealed several major acupoints on her body. Tashtish's body stiffened, and from then on she was unable to move. Chapter 9:31. Wan Yinliang nodded his head in satisfaction. After following him for so long, these 2 finally understood his master's temperament and knew that he had to capture her alive. In his panic, he didn't have the time to warn them. If they were to kill Tadish on the spot, it would be strange if he didn't vomit blood in anger. It would be a waste if he didn't play with such a beauty from head to toe for at least 30 times. Tadish was brought over by the 2. Observing her up close, despite being over 30 years old, her skin was still as tender as a young girl's. Even though Wan Yinliang was used to seeing beauties, he couldn't help but be amazed. One must know that in order to conceal her identity, Tadish had intentionally altered her appearance. Yet, she was still comparable to the #1 beauty of the Jin Kingdom, Songbai. Now that she had restored her original appearance, she was even more alluring and devastatingly beautiful. No wonder she was publicly acknowledged as the #1 beauty of the pugilistic world back then. Wan Yinliang couldn't help but click his tongue in wonder. Infinity, infinity, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to. In fact, the title of the most beautiful woman in the martial arts world was not that strict. Because there were many countries, the corresponding martial arts world was not unified. The martial arts world of each country had its own #1 beauty. Moreover, for those who obtained this title, beauty was only one aspect. Identity was also an important factor. For example, in the Southern Song dynasty, Huang Rong was the publicly acknowledged #1 beauty of the pugilistic world. This didn't mean that there was no woman in the entire Southern Song dynasty who could surpass her in terms of appearance. For example, Xiao Long Nu, Wang Yuyin, Zhou Zhuo, and the others were definitely not inferior to her in terms of appearance. Moreover, with the advantage of being young, they might be able to surpass Huang Rong. However, Huang Rong's identity was too special. She had guarded Xiangyang with her husband for over 10 years, and had become a goddess in the hearts of countless people of the Southern Dynasty. Within the kingdom of Ming and Qing, the publicly acknowledged #1 beauty was Chun Yuan of the past. A large part of the reason for this was also because she was a beauty that had soared to the heavens. The men who fought over her, whether it was Wu Sangui or Li Zicheng, were all influential figures. The other women, whether it was Princess Chongping, Jiu, or the Holy Anne of the Sun Moon sect, were slightly less legendary than Shen Yuan. Compared to them, Tadish's reputation as the #1 beauty of the martial world didn't play much of a role. Instead, it was the crushing effect brought about by her looks. Wan Yinliang couldn't help but reach out to caress Tashtish's face, only to be spat on by Tashtish. He didn't feel offended at all. Instead, he dipped his finger into the saliva on his face and tasted it. Immediately, he was inspired to write a poem, graceful and graceful figure, soft and supple like jade. Fragrant liquid lingers on the tip of the tongue. The beauty with the flute in her mouth cannot speak. His eyes sent flirtatious words. Wait until the dew of the flowers gradually thickens. The silver spear will dance deep and destroy the beauty. The colors will gradually become chaotic. The branches will gradually tremble. When the sun rises, the flowers will already be destroyed. Although Tajkis and Empress Payman were not Han people, they had a deep understanding of Han culture. Naturally, they understood the meaning of his poem and cursed him in their hearts for being shameless. As the female lead, Tajkis was both ashamed and angry. From the point of view of the poem itself, Wan Yinliang's poem did not even have any rhyme, so naturally it couldn't be considered a masterpiece. However, in between the lines, it was able to describe certain matters in a vivid and colorful manner, as if it was a vivid and lifelike painting unfolding in front of them. Tajkis was originally a contradictory character who was both affectionate and fickle. Her affectionate feelings were expressed toward Han Qinya, but her fickle feelings were expressed towards everyone except Han Qinya. Even towards Xie Sun, whom she was good friends with in the past, she would fall out with him just like that, not to mention being teased by Wan Yinliang like this. It was a pity that her internal energy was currently restrained. Otherwise, she would definitely chop Wan Yinliang into 8 pieces to vent the hatred in her heart. At the same time, she was unable to restrain her worry. At first glance, she could tell that Wan Yinliang was a lustful person. Now that she had fallen into his hands, it was obvious what kind of fate awaited her. Fortunately, Wan Yinliang very quickly shifted his attention away from her and focused on the battle on the other side. Although he was lustful, he was able to distinguish the severity of the matter. Today's matter was of great importance, and he could not afford to make any mistakes. Therefore, when faced with such a beauty who could cause the downfall of a country and bring suffering to the people, he only casually flirted with her. In any case, as long as he succeeded, he would have plenty of time. Tajkis also followed his gaze and looked at her companions. Now, she could only hope that the Persian 3 emissaries would be able to turn the situation around. Perhaps there would be a turning point in the situation. Unfortunately, she knew that the possibility of this happening was very low. Actually, in terms of martial arts, anyone of the Persian 3 emissaries might not necessarily be her match. In the past, the reason why they were able to beat Zhang Wuji, who had mastered the 9 Yang divine skill, and the Qingkun into such a sorry state was mainly because of their strange stances and their proficiency in joint attacks. Unfortunately, whether it was Ouyang Feng or Qiu Qianren, they were both great devils tempered by the blood and fire of the underworld. Whether it was combat experience or reaction time, they were far superior to the inexperienced Zhang Wuji. With one glance, they could see the advantages of the 3 emissaries. Therefore, intentionally or unintentionally, they separated the Persian 3 emissaries, causing them to fall into a predicament of fighting on their own. The Persian 3 emissaries simultaneously launched their strange moves. Several times, they tried to group together to attack each other, but unfortunately, Ouyang Feng and Qiu Qianren were able to neutralize them. As for Hui Weshi, her martial arts were the weakest among the 3 emissaries. In addition, she had lost an arm during the assassination attempt onto Xinghua. Against Gongsun Ji's golden saber and black sword, she was at a great disadvantage. Therefore, although Gongsun Ji's cultivation was the weakest among the 3, he had the easiest time. Seeing that victory was within his grasp, he was not in a hurry to hit his opponent. Instead, he continuously used his golden saber and black sword to cut her clothes. Towards the end, her clothes were fluttering in the wind. Not a single part of Hui Weishi's clothes was left intact. Wan Yinliang frowned and said, "Valley Master Gongsun, finish this quickly." He understood that any delay could lead to unforeseen circumstances. Moreover, they were plotting treason against the emperor today. How could he allow any mishaps? Only then did Gongsun Ji stop playing games. His attacks suddenly became swift and fierce. Hui Weshi could no longer withstand his attacks. After a few stances, her pressure points were sealed. Seeing that Gongsun Ji, who was the weakest among them, had the upper hand, Ouyang Feng and Qiu Qianren both grunted and used their most powerful techniques. Lu Yinshi and Miaofeng knew that they were going to lose today. Their hearts were already filled with fear. When they saw Tajkis and Hui Wesher being captured, they were even more frightened. Under such circumstances, they were no match for Ouyang Feng and Qiu Qianren. Tajkis and Hui Wesher could use their beauty to preserve their lives. Lu Yanshi and Miaofeng Shi, these two men of the western regions, would not show any mercy to the fairer sex. Two miserable screams were heard, and the two lost their lives. When Tajkis saw this scene, she could not help but turn her head away. Although she did not normally have a good relationship with the Persian three emissaries and was humiliated by them when they were captured on the Lingxi Island, this time they were on the same side. She could not help but feel sympathy for the loss of the rabbit. Wang Yanliang did not have the time to worry about Tajkis. Instead, he issued one order after another. Finally, his eyes revealed a hint of murderous intent. Take the emperor's gold medallion and summon Wanyan Zongxian and Zongmin to the palace. Tell them that the emperor has something to discuss with them. Chapter 11. Chapter 932. When Wanyan Zongxian received the emperor's verbal order for him to enter the palace and have an audience with the emperor, he did not have any suspicions. This was because the emperor had tactfully revealed to him several times that he was going to depose Empress Pei Man and make Changsheng Prince's wife, Lady Peach Blossom, the new empress. In Wanyan Zongxian's opinion, this was very inappropriate. Although it was shocking to simply take his sister-in-law into the harem, it was not a big deal as long as it was done secretly. In the past, Wanyan Zongxian had Zhao Gou's mother, Empress Wei, and his wife, Empress Xing, in bed with him. How could he be an old pedant in this regard? He objected because the emperor's killing of Changsheng Prince had already caused a lot of controversy. If he were to publicly take his wife as the empress, not only would the common people be in an uproar, but even the nobles would find it hard to accept. During this period of time, he had been thinking about how to persuade the emperor to change his mind. Coincidentally, he thought of a clever method and felt that this time he would definitely be able to persuade the emperor. Just as he was thinking of quietly going to the emperor after the morning court session, he received the palace edict. Without the slightest bit of suspicion, he entered the palace without any precaution. As soon as he entered the palace, he was arrested and executed by Wan Yanliang's men. Before he died, he did not know about the upheaval in the palace and thought that his suggestion to change the empress had angered the emperor. Before he died, he said to the people around him, "Who can speak for me? My death is not to be regretted, but I hope that the emperor will not listen to me." He hoped that these words would reach the emperor's ears so that he would stop being so stubborn. As for the left prime minister, Wanyan Zongmin, he did not receive an edict from the emperor, but a secret edict from the empress. Because of their many years of marriage, he was inextricably linked to Empress Pei Man's family. Over the years, he had always been a strong supporter of Empress Pei Man in the imperial court. The two of them worked together and controlled the Jin court for a long time. Although their power was affected after Wanyan Shui took over, their alliance had always been unbreakable. Therefore, when he received Empress Pei Man's message from the palace, he did not suspect anything. Like Wanyan Zongxian, he entered the palace unprepared and was executed by Wan Yanliang's men. From this, it could be seen how meticulous Wan Yanliang's plan was. He had even taken these details into consideration. That was why he could effortlessly get rid of the two leaders of the Jin Kingdom's military and political circles. In this way, no one in the entire imperial court could threaten him. When Wan Yanliang received news from his subordinates that the two men had been taken care of, his last bit of worry disappeared. There was still some time before the morning court session. Wan Yanliang had an idea and looked towards the Hall of Benevolence. I can take advantage of this time to taste the delicate bodies of those beauties. Just now, Wan Yanliang was busy issuing one order after another to control the situation. Therefore, he dispatched some men to bring Empress Pei Man and Tadish to the Hall of Benevolence. At this time, the two women were sitting on the dragon bed, holding each other's hands and looking at each other with tears in their eyes. After a long time, Empress Pei Man sighed regretfully. "I didn't expect that after all our fighting, we would end up benefiting that dog Wan Yanliang. Tadish frowned. I have never fought with you over anything. It is you who have unilaterally treated me as an enemy. Empress Pei Man was stabbed by her, and she couldn't help but say angrily, didn't fight for what? Who was the one who provoked His Majesty every now and then? So much so that His Majesty recently had the idea of replacing the Empress. Replacing the Empress? Tadish revealed a look of astonishment. After clarifying what was going on, she couldn't help but cry out, if I had known that he had the idea of making me the Empress, I wouldn't have been in such a hurry to act. Thinking of how they had taken such a huge risk to control the Emperor, only to end up helping someone else, Tadish regretted it. If she had known earlier, she wouldn't have chosen such a radical method. With her beauty and charm, it wouldn't have been difficult for her to make Wan Yanliang make up his mind. As long as she became the Empress, she would be able to legitimately influence the decisions of the Jin Kingdom. She wouldn't have ended up in such a miserable state. You slut! Aren't you ashamed to say that? Empress Pei Man spat hatefully. If you hadn't plotted against His Majesty, how could Wan Yanliang and his group of rebels succeed in killing the Emperor so easily? Who are you calling slut? A murderous glint flashed across Tadish's eyes. She had always been proud of her chastity, so how could she tolerate Empress Pei Man repeatedly calling her slut? So what if I am? Empress Pei Man coldly snorted. Stop pretending to be a chaste woman. With Wan Yanliang's temperament, none of us will be able to escape being humiliated by him in a moment. What are you still pretending for? Tadish's breathing instantly turned hurried. If not for the fact that her entire body was restrained, she would have long killed this woman before her. However, when she thought about the possibility of what Tadish said happening, a deep sense of helplessness washed over her. All these years, she had been shuttling between Changshan King and the Jin Kingdom's emperor, yet she was still able to maintain her chastity. Could it be that she was destined to meet her doom today? Chinya, my husband, if your spirit is in heaven, please tell me what I should do. Suddenly, a thought flashed through Tadish's mind. She looked straight at Empress Pei Man and asked, why is your tone so calm? I can't sense your worry at all. Empress Pei Man's expression changed. Am I? Tadish's train of thought became clearer. Of course I am. From the moment you appeared, you were behaving strangely. When you fell into our hands, you didn't show the slightest bit of fear. Instead, you threatened us in all sorts of ways. When Wan Yanliang appeared, I subconsciously thought that you were in cahoots with him. But now, it seems that you are relying on someone else. Empress Pei Man's expression flickered. Finally, she snorted and said, so what? That person is my reliance, not yours. You should obediently wait to serve Wan Yanliang in bed. Who knows, if you serve him well, he might even bestow you the title of a concubine. Shut up. When she thought of the possibility of Wan Yanliang doing those disgusting things on her body, Tadish's face turned pale. Ask your backer to help me out. Otherwise, when Wan Yanliang comes in, I will tell him everything. When that happens, no one will be able to leave. Empress Pei Man immediately became furious. You slut. At this moment, Wan Yanliang's voice sounded from the doorway. What are you two beauties doing? Why are you so angry? It seems that this prince will have to soothe your anger. Tadish ignored him and continued to look at Empress Pei Man. This is your last chance. Empress Pei Man bit her lips and finally nodded. You win. What are you two beauties talking about? Wan Yanliang was confused. However, his attention was quickly attracted by the two women's figures. Tadish sat there with a slight anger, looking like a meticulously carved jade statue. She was bright and sparkling, and every part of her body gave people the urge to caress her. Although Empress Pei Man was not as beautiful as Tadish, she was still a famous beauty in the Jin Kingdom. Coupled with her high status as an empress, her attractiveness to men was not inferior to Tadish's. Wan Yanliang looked left and right, but could not decide on who to start with. In the end, he simply made up his mind. This prince is really muddle-headed. Is there even a need to choose? Let's do it together. Chapter 9:33. Wan Yanliang took off his clothes as he walked towards the dragon bed. My two beauties, whoever serves me better, no, I will confer her the title of Empress. Pei Man laughed coldly. I am the Empress. Do I need you to confer me the title? Wan Liang's eyes turned cold. Since ancient times, when an emperor dies, there will always be someone buried with him in the harem. Do you want to try? Empress Pei Man's expression changed several times, but she did not refute. Tajtish saw that he was getting closer and closer and tried to stall for time. Your Highness, why do you need to trick us? You already have a legitimate princess in your residence. If you ascend the throne, she will naturally be the Empress. How can we have a chance? 10 R / Wan Liang's expression turned ugly. That may not be true. Although Tu Danjing is the princess, she may not be the Empress. In fact, during this period of time, he had been regretting what happened that night. Although he finally got to taste Goodbye's body as he wished, that night his wife was also under another man's body. When he thought of that scene, it was as if there was a thorn in his heart. Today, after the coup d'etat, he was even more vexed. If he had known earlier, he would have endured for a while. Once he became the emperor, obtaining Goodbye would be a piece of cake. Why did he have to sacrifice his wife? Now, every time Wan Liang saw his wife, he could not help but think of some unpleasant scenes. Thus, when he said that the Empress may not be Tu Danjing, he was not completely deceiving them. When he accidentally thought of this matter, Wan Liang's anger flared up. Because Tajtish had mentioned this matter, he was prepared to vent his anger on her. With reddened eyes, he reached out to pull Tajtish's clothes. Tajtish's expression changed greatly, and she subconsciously tried to dodge. Unfortunately, her acupoints were sealed, and she could not move an inch. Moreover, she had used the pink smoke in her mouth to deal with the Xing. She was now completely defenseless. At this time, a mocking voice suddenly sounded from outside the hall. To deal with such a devastatingly beautiful woman, if you can't get along, then attacking the heart is the best, and attacking the body is the second. Your Highness is also a flower lover, so why did you choose the most impulsive and despicable method? Who dares to speak such nonsense here? Wan Liang was enraged, but he quickly calmed down. His heart sank. For someone to appear outside the palace at this time meant that something must have happened. When Wan Liang put on his clothes and walked out of the hall, his other subordinates gathered around him. He hesitated for a moment, then waved his hand and said, "Bring the two women out." He didn't know how many people the other party had, and was worried that the other party was using a diversion tactic to attract everyone's attention and take advantage of the chaos to rescue the two women. He would never allow a woman of peerless elegance like Tadish to fall into the hands of another man. As for Pei Man, her identity as the Empress would be of great help in stabilizing the situation of the imperial court. Therefore, he could not afford to lose either of these two ladies. He would only feel at ease keeping them by his side. Tranquil. When Wan Liang saw the person standing outside the hall, he was shocked. "Prince, long time no see." Song Qingshu smiled. "Shouldn't you be at Chongyang Palace?" Wan Liang frowned. During this time, the people he had sent to keep an eye on the situation kept coming back with news. From the latest news, Tang Kuobian, Pu Cha, and Ahu's 3,000 men should be near Mount Zhongnan. Who said I was at Chongyang Palace? Song Qingshu suddenly came to a realization. He casually threw a package in front of him and said, "It should be this person who told you." The package rolled on the ground a few times and soon revealed a round object. Wan Liang took a closer look and couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Tu Danjin. Inside the package was the severed head of Tu Danjin, the person he had sent to keep an eye on Tang Kuobian. Tu Danjin's eyes immediately turned red. He and Tu Danjin were both from the Tu Danjin family and had always been close. Xiao Tongu Dai and Yellow Yuani also had gloomy expressions. Although their relationship with Tu Danjin wasn't as good as Tu Danjin's, they were all Wan Liang's 4 bodyguards. Seeing their comrade's head separated from his body, they couldn't help but feel sad. They took a step forward and were about to attack when Wan Liang hurriedly stopped them. He still had many questions to ask the other party. It wouldn't be too late to take revenge after he answered them. "Since you're here, Pucha and Ahu must have returned as well. Where are they now? Wan Liang asked coldly. Just as he finished speaking, the faint sounds of weapons clashing could be heard from the palace. Song Qingshu shrugged his shoulders. The Pucha family has always been loyal to the royal family. Now that there's a traitor in the family, they're trying to clean up the family. Wan Yinliang's expression changed. No wonder Pucha and Ahu hadn't returned after so long after he sent them to take over the imperial army. It turned out that Pucha and Ahu were delaying them. However, he wasn't too worried. Instead, he coldly said, Ahu has at most 3,000 men under his command. Ahu has far more men under his command. With the help of my own troops, it's hard to say who will be the one to clean up who. Song Qingshu smiled. Your Highness does have a lot of men under your command, but can they be more than the 100,000 soldiers of the northern barracks? Wan Liang's expression finally changed. Impossible. Unless it's the Emperor's tiger seal, no one can mobilize the northern barracks. There were a total of 3 armies near the capital. One was the imperial bodyguards under the control of the imperial inspector. Wan Liang had used a scheme to get rid of the imperial inspector, Wan Tesi, and then moved the left deputy inspector, Pucha Ahu, away, allowing his trusted aide, Ahu, to take control of the imperial bodyguards. Another army was the defense army of the capital, which was under the control of the imperial police. After many years of infiltration, most of this army was under his control. The last army was the northern barracks. It could be said to be the most elite army in the entire Jin kingdom. It was under the direct command of the emperor. If a war were to break out, the soldiers in the marshal's office would come from this army. It was impossible for Wan Liang not to consider such an army. However, since this army could only be mobilized by the emperor himself or by the emperor's tiger seal, he chose to attack directly. As long as he controlled the emperor, this army would naturally be under his control. Although he did not find the tiger seal just now, from the testimony of the relevant personnel, it should have been hidden somewhere by the emperor. Since he already controlled the imperial palace, he could slowly search for it. Even if he could not find it, as long as he became the new emperor, he would still be able to command the army. Now that he heard the news of this army from Song Qingshu, how could he not be moved? The emperor already knew that you were up to no good, so he secretly gave the tiger seal to me. I have already sent the Qi Kingdom's princess, Wan Yinping, to mobilize the northern barracks into the capital. If everything goes according to plan, your men should be under control by now. Song Qingshu's calm voice was like a bolt from the blue that shook Wan Liang's ears. Chapter 2 of the basics. I have something to do today, so I can't finish updating. As an apology, I will share the original manuscript of The Art of Disguise in the VIP group. Chapter 9:34. Hearing Song Qing's words, Empress Pei Man and Tadish revealed expressions of puzzlement. Tadish was puzzled because when Wan Yin was being interrogated, he didn't reveal the slightest hint that he had given the tiger tally to someone else. Otherwise, he would definitely seize the opportunity to use it as a bargaining chip to make them hesitate in taking action. As for Empress Pei Man, she was puzzled because the person she was waiting for was not Tang Kuobian. Moreover, Tang Kuobian and Wan Yin were not close. Why would the emperor give such an important tiger tally to a marginal person? Nonsense! Wan Liang roared angrily. After so many years, how could he not know Wan Yin's temperament? If Wan Yinshui really had such a plan, he wouldn't have dared to think of rebelling against his superior. Therefore, he didn't believe that Wan Yinshui would give the tiger tally to Tang Kuo. However, judging from the current situation, it was highly likely that Tang Kuo had the tiger tally in his possession. Noticing the puzzled expressions on the other side, Song Qing laughed inwardly. You guys can keep guessing. No matter how hard you try, you won't be able to guess how he obtained the tiger tally. Of course, Wan Yin would not give him the tiger tally. Not long ago, Wan Yin had thrown him in a prison and almost killed him. The reason why Song Qing had the tiger tally was because he heard from Tu Danjing that Wan Liang was about to start a coup. Therefore, he sneaked out of prison in the dead of night and snuck into Wan Yin's palace to steal the tiger tally. With Song Qing's current level of lightness kung fu, if he was a serious thief, there was nothing in this world that he could not steal. Moreover, he was very familiar with the Jin Imperial Palace. He had even been to the Emperor's palace more than once. However, even if he stole the tiger tally, it would not be of much use. Once the Emperor discovered that the tiger tally had been stolen, he would naturally have a set of well-developed countermeasures. Song Qing would not be able to mobilize troops even if he wanted to. However, coincidentally, Tish and Wang Yinliang had started a coup. Wang Yinxian did not even have the time to realize that the tiger tally had been stolen. On the surface, Song Qing left the capital and went to Chongyang Palace in accordance with the imperial edict. However, he did not go far. First, he found an opportunity to kill Tu Donjin. Although Tu Donjin's martial arts were good, Song Qing knew that Tu Donjin had no chance of surviving. Then, he brought Tu Donjin's head to Pucha and explained everything. Pucha Ahu had originally felt that the imperial edict ordering him to lead troops to Mount Zhongnan was somewhat abrupt, and after hearing Song Qing's analysis, although he did not completely believe it, he still agreed to quietly return to the capital to investigate. When he returned to the capital, he found that there was indeed a change in the palace. Pucha Ahu could not help but be shocked and angry. He hurriedly led his troops in the direction of the Hall of Benevolence to protect the emperor. Pucha Ahu, who was in the middle of taking over the defense of the palace, naturally did not allow it. The two armies fought, and Song Qing took advantage of the chaos to reach the Hall of Benevolence first. After all, Wang Yinliang was an ambitious and ruthless person. After the initial panic, he quickly calmed down and said, "Haha, your empty city stratagem is not very good. If you could really mobilize the northern barracks, why would you appear here alone? It's just a bluff to mess up the morale of my army. Men, whoever helps this prince kill this delusional person will be heavily rewarded by this prince." Song Qing couldn't help but admire Wang Yinliang. When the soldiers heard that the tiger tally was in his hands, even Wang Yinliang's confidants couldn't help but feel their hearts waver. However, Wang Yinliang reacted quickly and calmed them down with a few words. Although Wang Yinliang was licentious and cruel, objectively speaking, he was indeed a very capable person. Gong Sun Ji stepped forward and said, "I am willing to serve your highness. After killing this thief, I don't dare ask for any other rewards. I only ask that your highness bestow the Persian woman to me." Wang Yinliang frowned. He knew that the Persian woman Gong Sun Ji was referring to was Hui Yueshi. Although that woman was not as beautiful as Tish, she was still an outstanding beauty. He had intended to keep her for himself, but since Gong Sun Ji had spoken, he would not be jealous of his subordinate at this juncture. "Good. After Mr. Gong Sun kills Tang Quobian, I will bestow Hui Yueshi to you." Yin Liang smiled. "Thank you, your highness." Ouyang Feng and Xiao Qianren frowned at the look on Gong Sun Ji's face. They subconsciously moved away from Gong Sun Ji, as if they were ashamed to be associated with such a person. Song Qing couldn't help but mock him. "Gong Sun Ji, you're a famous man in Jianghu. I didn't expect you to be reduced to begging for food. Do you have any shame?" Gong Sun Ji flew into a rage. "You're asking for death, you little thief." As soon as he finished speaking, he unsheathed his golden saber and black sword and pointed it at Song Qing's legs. Gong Sun Ji was deeply touched. In order to take revenge, he didn't want to kill his opponent immediately. Instead, he wanted to cut off his opponent's arms and legs first, then torture him until he begged for death. Gong Sun Ji was very confident in his attack. With his martial arts, as long as he didn't run into any of the 5 uniques, he could basically do whatever he wanted. Moreover, Tang Quobian was not famous for his martial arts. At most, he knew some horsemanship and archery. But in Gong Sun Ji's eyes, such martial arts were no different from that of a wild hunter. As the saber and sword flashed, Gong Sun Ji suddenly had a bad feeling. He keenly sensed that his saber seemed to have missed. What was even more unbelievable was that Tang Quobian was now standing leisurely on his golden saber and black sword. How was this possible? Gong Sunji hurriedly tried to pull his golden saber and black sword back, but the saber and sword seemed to be pressed down by a mountain. No matter how hard he tried, they wouldn't budge. As the saying goes, even a vicious tiger doesn't eat its cubs. In the original The Return of the Condor Heroes, Gong Sunji was usually a sanctimonious person, but at the critical moment, he didn't even care about his daughter's life. In Song Qing's view of values, he didn't discriminate against the so-called bad people because he knew that people were complicated and contradictory. They were not as simple as in a novel, where they were either good or evil or good, like Murong Fu, Lin Pingji, or even Ouyang Feng and Duan Yanqing, who were recognized as villains in the original novel. There were also many people who sympathized with them or admired them to a certain degree. Unfortunately, Song Qing couldn't find anything in Gong Sunji that was worth admiring. He couldn't help but say coldly, "Killing you will only dirty my hands." Gong Sunji was already scared out of his wits, but when he heard this, he let out a long sigh of relief. At the same time, a trace of hatred flashed across his eyes. "Humph! I will return the humiliation today 10 times over." Unfortunately, as soon as this thought came to his mind, Gong Sunji's feet were getting closer and closer. With a crack, Gong Sunji's head turned almost 180 degrees and drooped down weakly, as if it was hanging on by a layer of skin. "Killing you will only dirty my hands, but it won't be a problem if I use my feet," Song Qing said coldly. Chapter 9:35. Although the entire process took a long time to describe, it actually happened in the blink of an eye. In Wang Yanliang's eyes, one moment Gong Sunji confidently charged forward, the next he found his head hanging upside down from his neck. Ouyang Feng and Qiu Qianren's expressions changed. Although Gong Sunji's character wasn't very good, his martial arts were pretty good. Both of them knew that it wouldn't be easy for them to kill him, but he was killed by Tang Quobian so easily. The whole process seemed to have taken only one move. How was this possible? Wang Yanliang blurted out. Suddenly, his expression changed. "Who are you?" Song Qingshu spread out his hands. "Your Highness, can't you recognize me? I am Tang Quobian." "Of course you're not Tang Quobian," Chen Changsheng said with a smile. Wang Yanliang's voice was cold. He was well aware of Tang Quobian's martial arts. If Tang Quobian really was that skilled, he wouldn't have been so easily injured by Huang Rong's dog-beating stick. At that time, Wang Yanliang had specially sent a physician to examine Tang Quobian. After confirming that Tang Quobian's spine was indeed severely injured, he decided to send a suicide squad to kill Tang Quobian. Song Qingshu smiled. "Since your Highness has seen through me, there's no point in me continuing to pretend." With that, he took off his mask and revealed his true appearance. Song Qingshu. Wang Yanliang subconsciously took a step back. Back at the inn, he had personally witnessed Song Qingshu single-handedly beat up all the Mongolian experts. The scene at that time had shocked him so much that he subconsciously felt a little afraid when he saw Song Qingshu now. Empress Peiman's expression was also very interesting. She had been waiting for Song Qingshu to appear and save her, but she had never imagined that his other identity was actually Tang Quobian. Suddenly, she remembered that Tang Quobian was Gu Bai's husband. Her heart couldn't help but skip a beat. If that was the case, didn't that mean that she, as a sister-in-law, had slept with the same man as her sister-in-law? Tajtish recognized him as the man from that night at Wang Yanshui's bedchamber. She felt her cheeks burn when she thought about how, apart from her husband, he was the only man who had forced her to take off her clothes in front of him. Strictly speaking, she and Song Qingshu were enemies, but they were still enemies. Compared to Wang Yanliang, it was easier for her to accept falling into his hands. However, she was not very optimistic about Song Qingshu's chances of defeating Wang Yanliang's side. Wang Yanliang's side had the famous Western poison Ouyang Feng and the iron palm on the water Qiu Qianren. Previously, Lu Yunshi and Miaofeng Shi, who had always been arrogant and haughty, had not been able to last long against them. At this moment, the two women's thoughts were complicated. Ouyang Feng and Qiu Qianren's attitude was also quite playful. As far as Ouyang Feng was concerned, there was no enmity between him and Song Qingshu. On the contrary, the friendship between the two could be said to be quite deep. The Divine Dragon Island could only wake up from its madness with the help of the other party. He clearly remembered this kindness. Coupled with the series of events that happened later, although the two of them weren't considered friends in the traditional sense, their friendship was much deeper than most friends. However, both of them belonged to different camps today. Judging from his situation, he and Wan Yinliang would probably fight to the death. What should he do later? If Ouyang Feng had to risk his life for Wan Yinliang and fight to the death with Song Qingshu, he definitely wouldn't do it. However, Wan Yinliang had treated him well during this period of time. If he betrayed him now and word got out, people who didn't know the truth would think that he was afraid of a junior. It would inevitably damage his reputation as the Western Poison. Ouyang Feng was known as the Western Poison and was viewed by countless people in Jianghu as an evil demon. Of course, he would scoff at the idea of loyalty. However, something like face was extremely important to him. Thus, he fell into a dilemma. As for Qiu Qianren, his expression was currently much more unsightly. Back at the inn, he had also witnessed Song Qingshu's battle against the group of Mongolian grandmasters. His heart was also very shocked. Later on, he relied on the fact that he had the advantage in numbers and wasn't afraid of fighting against Song Qingshu. However, after a few times, not only did he not gain any advantage, but he was also seriously injured by the other party. It took him a few months to recover. Now that he had just reappeared, he unexpectedly encountered this jinx again. After these few fights, although Qiu Qianren was unwilling to admit it, he also understood that the gap between him and Song Qingshu was getting bigger and bigger. If he had to choose an opponent in Jianghu that he didn't want to face, Song Qingshu would definitely be the first to bear the brunt. Wan Yinliang finally recovered from his shock. Suddenly, he thought of something, and his expression became even more unsightly. That night at the prince consort's residence, was it also you? Song Qingshu knew what he was talking about that night, and couldn't help smiling slightly. That's right, I didn't think that Wang Yu would treat me so well, actually letting Wang Fei personally accompany me. Speaking of which, Wang Fei's body is really soft and soft. Shut up. Wan Yinliang's face turned green, and he hurriedly said, that night, Songbai was also played by this prince over and over again. Song Qingshu looked at him with a pitiful expression. Now that you know that Tang Quobian is an impostor, do you still naively think that the person who accompanied you that night was the real Songbai? She was just a prostitute that I found in the 8 great alleys. Wan Yinliang's chest rose and fell rapidly. Finally, he couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. Although the crowd didn't know what happened that night, from the conversation between the two of them, they could roughly guess what happened. They all looked at Wan Yinliang with a pitiful expression. Empress Pei Man had been in the palace for many years and had seen this kind of thing happen among the nobles. However, it was usually an exchange of concubines. This was the first time she had heard of someone exchanging his own wife like Wan Yinliang did. Thinking about how she was forced into a corner by Wan Yinliang, she felt a great sense of satisfaction in her heart. Tajtish was both ashamed and angry. She thought that Song Qingshu and Wan Yinliang were both not good people. They actually did such a despicable and shameless thing. However, comparing the two of them, Wan Yinliang's act of letting his wife be humiliated was even more despicable. Ouyang Feng's face twitched. He thought to himself, this kid is indeed an interesting person. After knowing him for so long, he has always been the one taking advantage of others. I've never heard of him suffering at the hands of others. Alas, if he had been born a few years earlier, Kur would have become his disciple and learned a few moves from him. Kur wouldn't have ended up in such a state. Isn't he the best candidate to take revenge on Guijing and Huang Rong, who don't care about etiquette? Sensing his subordinates' pitiful gazes, Wan Yinliang couldn't take it anymore. He pointed at Song Qingshu and roared, everyone, attack together! Kill him for this prince. Second chapters. As of noon today, Zheng Heng's monthly votes totaled 2078 chapters. corresponding to 30 chapters. Now, I've added 11 chapters, leaving me 19 chapters short. I'll add them as soon as possible. Chapter 9, 36. Most of the guards looked at each other in dismay. Even an expert like Gong Sun Ji died in a single move. Weren't they just going to be sent to their deaths? Qiu Qianren hesitated for a moment and couldn't help but glance at Ouyang Feng. Noticing that Ouyang Feng was still standing at the same spot without any intention of making a move, Qiu Qianren thought for a moment and gave up on the idea. In the end, the first to respond to Wan Yinliang's order was Tu Dan Ali Chuhu. He and Tu Danjin were from the same clan and were very close. Seeing his comrade's head separated from his body, he had long wanted to avenge him. Receiving Wan Yinliang's order, he roared and charged out. Two of the four guards, Yelu Yuani and Xiao Tonggu Dai, hesitated for a moment before following suit. Although they didn't have a deep relationship with Tu Danjin, they understood the principle that the lips were cold and the teeth were cold. Now that the three of them were working together, they might be able to defeat Song Qingshu. If they waited for Tu Dan Ali Chuhu to die, then the situation would truly be hopeless. Facing the combined attack of the three, Song Qingshu didn't dare to be careless. Although he didn't see how easily Xiao Tonggu Dai and Yelu Yuani captured Tadish, he did see with his own eyes that even a peak expert like Yang Guo was caught off guard at Autumn Fragrance Brothel. Naturally, he didn't dare to be careless. Be careful. Witnessing the seamless teamwork of the trio, Tadish recalled the scene of her being restrained and blurted out. Song Qingshu didn't expect her to warn him and smiled at her, causing Empress Peiman to look at Tadish suspiciously. You two know each other? Thinking back to that night, Tadish couldn't help but blush. She shook her head. I don't. She didn't understand why she was so concerned about that person. Could it be that the two of them shared a bed that night gave her a special feeling towards that person? What a joke. She wasn't a teenage girl who would fall in love with a man just because he saw her body. If you don't know him, why are you worried for him? Noticing Tadish's strange expression, Empress Peiman's innate sensitivity as a woman raised her guard. Falling into his hands is better than falling into that perverted Wan Yinliang's hands. Tadish lightly said, You're just taking it for granted. Empress Peiman's cheeks were burning. She secretly added, compared to Wan Yinliang, Song Qingshu is definitely not inferior in that aspect. Wan Yinliang watched for a while and realized that although the three bodyguards were on the offensive, their attacks hadn't even touched the hem of Song Qingshu's clothes. When he bumped into them, he hurriedly ran towards Ouyang Feng and Qiu Yu. Mr. Ouyang, Chief Qiu, please lend them a hand. Ouyang Feng indifferently replied, Your Highness, you may not know this, but with this old man's status in Jianghu, how could I possibly bully someone with numbers, let alone a junior? Qiu Qianren saw that Ouyang Feng had no intention of making a move, so how could he be stupid enough to risk his life? Brother Ouyang is right, he said with a similar attitude. Wan Yinliang was almost angered to death. He thought to himself, You guys eat and drink for me. These days I've treated you like my ancestors, but when the time comes, you guys are all so unreliable. As for their nonsense about disdaining to join hands with others to bully someone with numbers, Wan Yinliang didn't believe a word of it. Although he was an amateur in martial arts, he could clearly see that if they fought alone, they were definitely not Song Qingshu's match. Even if they joined hands, they might not be able to defeat him. What are you trying to show off in front of me? Although Wan Yinliang was extremely angry, he didn't dare to show it. After all, these two were famous ruthless people in Jianghu. Offending them on an ordinary day was nothing. But if he were to offend them at this critical moment, he wouldn't be able to bear the consequences. After dodging several times, Song Qingshu had already gradually grasped the pattern of their joint attack. Before the three of them formed an encirclement again, he no longer dodged. Instead of advancing, he retreated and took the initiative to wait on the path that Xiao Tonggu had to pass through. When Xiao Tonggu was about to land, he was shocked to find that Song Qingshu was actually waiting there in advance. Hastily, he guarded the vital acupoints on his body while leaping to the side. Yelu Yuani, who was closest to him, saw this and hurriedly came to his rescue. Song Qingshu smiled faintly. He didn't chase after Xiao Tonggu because he wasn't his target from the beginning. A sharp sword energy soared into the sky, and Yelu Yuani's whole body suddenly froze on the spot. Although there wasn't a single wound on his body, his brain had already been turned into a paste by the sword energy. Even a great principal golden immortal wouldn't be able to save him. The reason why their joint attack was so powerful was mainly because they used a formation as a cover. Everyone didn't need to defend themselves when they attacked, because the other people's attacks just happened to play the role of protecting the other person. In this way, their attack power would naturally multiply, so much so that even some top experts would be caught off guard and suffer grievances. Originally, with Tu Danjin's death, their formation had weakened a bit. Now that Yelu Yuani was dead, they could no longer maintain the formation. Without the cover of the other two, Tu Danjin's body revealed a huge opening. Song Qingshu's figure flashed, and the two of them passed by each other. Tu Danjin's throat gurgled a few times, and blood seeped out of the corner of his mouth. It turned out that his heart meridian had been broken. Seeing that two of his companions had been killed in the blink of an eye, Xiao Tonggu was finally terrified. He let out a strange cry, and without even caring about Wanyan Liang, he directly leaped into the distance. Song Qingshu stretched out his hand, and in the distance, an imperial guard suddenly lost his grip on the saber in his hand. The saber shot up into the sky, blocking Xiao Tonggu's path of escape. Xiao Tonggu was caught off guard, and his head directly collided with the tip of the saber. Song Qingshu turned to Wanyan Liang and smiled. "Your Highness, I've already helped you deal with your guard for desertion." Seeing Song Qingshu smile, Wanyan Liang felt a chill run down his spine. He hastily hid behind Ouyang Feng and Qiu Qianren. "I asked Mr. Ouyang and Chief Qiu to take action." He was secretly angry, thinking that at this time they couldn't possibly refuse. Ouyang Feng and Qiu Qianren glanced at each other, seeking the other's opinion. At this time, Song Qingshu suddenly spoke. "Brother Ouyang, we can be considered old friends. Why should we fight over an outsider?" Ouyang Feng revealed a hesitant expression. "The Prince of Hailing has treated this old man quite well these days. If this old man leaves him now, what will the people of Jianghu think of me?" Song Qingshu smiled. "When did the Grand Western Poison become a loyal and righteous man? Old brother, when have you ever cared about the opinions of the common people?" Ouyang Feng's eyes brightened, and he immediately laughed. "You brat, you really understand me. How about this? We'll be straightforward. If you promise me one thing, I'll help you instead." Wanyan Liang immediately became anxious. What does Mr. Ouyang want? This prince can agree to it 10 times over. Ouyang Feng looked at him with an arrogant expression, completely ignoring him. Song Qingshu smiled. "I know what old brother wants me to promise. No problem." Ouyang Feng's greatest wish was naturally to deal with the Guo couple. He didn't even need a guess to know. It's easy to speak with smart people. From now on, this old man will be on your side. Ouyang Feng didn't even ask if he guessed correctly and directly laughed. Song Qingshu then turned his head to look at Qiu Qianren, who had a F * king dog expression on his face. I wonder what Chief Qiu plans to do? Jia Gung 12. End of this chapter. Chapter 9:37. Qiu Qianren's current mood was hard to describe with words. In his heart, he couldn't help but curse Ouyang Feng for having no moral integrity. However, he only dared to think about it. He couldn't defeat Song Qing alone, let alone the vicious and merciless Western Poison. He was quick to react and knew that Wanyan Liang's defeat was inevitable. He had relied on Wanyan Liang in pursuit of wealth and glory. How could he be so foolish as to sell his life to him? When he heard Song Qing's question, he laughed awkwardly and coughed before replying in a serious manner. "Brother Ouyang and I have been friends for many years and have always advanced and retreated together. This time is no exception." Ouyang Feng looked at him strangely and thought, when did our relationship become so good? In terms of shamelessness, there aren't many people who can compare to him. But Ouyang Feng was just silently cursing him. At this time, how could he expose the other party? Seeing that the Grandmaster he had spent a large sum of money to invite had suddenly turned against him, Wan Liang cursed angrily and hurriedly grabbed Tajtish and Empress Payman to shield him. Surnamed Song, I admit defeat today, but if you want the two of them to live, you must let me go. Song Qing revealed a surprised expression. Your Highness, are you mistaken? These two women are not related to me in any way. Why should I let you go for them? Although Empress Payman knew that he was saying this on purpose, she couldn't help but feel uneasy. She was worried that Song Qing would really burn the bridge after crossing the river. However, she was someone who had weathered many storms and knew that if Wan Liang found out about her relationship with Song Qing, the disadvantages would be greater than the advantages. She resisted the impulse and kept her mouth shut. Compared to her, Tajtish was much calmer. Whether she ended up in Wan Liang's or Song Qing's hands, it would not be a good thing for her. Let's not beat around the bush. After Wan Rui's death, he will be in control of Empress Payman. You and I both know very well what kind of effect that will have, Wan Liang said quickly. As for this Zishan Dragon Queen, she is even more beautiful. Which man would not be moved by her? This king will use them to exchange for a safe escape. If you don't agree, worst comes to worst, this king will perish together with them. Wan Liang had already thought it through. Today's defeat was already decided, so there was no point in forcing him to stay in the capital. When he left the capital and gathered some trusted generals, he should be able to gather another reliable army. When the time came, he could take advantage of the emperor's death and the court's lack of a leader to return to the capital. He might have a chance to turn the situation around. Song Qing nodded. I have to admit that what you said is very attractive. How about this? You let them go, and I will let you go. Wan Liang was so angry that he laughed. Do you think I'm a 3-year-old? Without a hostage, how can I leave alive? Once this king reaches a safe place, I will naturally let them go. Song Qing declined to comment. Instead, he said to Ouyang Feng and Qiu Qianren, May I trouble the two of you to clean up these people? Ouyang Feng glanced at Wan Liang's demoralized soldiers and revealed a cruel smile. No problem. His figure flashed, and all sorts of pitiful screams could be heard. Qiu Qianren was also very straightforward. Since he had already pledged his allegiance to him, he would do his best to leave a good impression on his new master. Unwilling to fall behind, he pounced on the soldiers. Although the soldiers that Wan Liang had brought with him were carefully selected, after witnessing the sudden change in the situation, they knew that defeat was inevitable. Their morale was gone, and they all ran away. The two grandmasters were like tigers in a flock of sheep. In the blink of an eye, they slaughtered the soldiers. Seeing this, Wan Liang was both shocked and angry. Song, what is the meaning of this? Song Qing calmly replied, I agreed to let you go, but I didn't agree to let your subordinates go. Is there a problem? Fine, fine. Wan Liang was so angry that his teeth chattered, but there was nothing he could do. Then can I go now? Wait a moment. Song Qing took out a pen and paper from somewhere and threw it in front of him. Your Highness must be planning to leave the capital soon. It would be inconvenient to bring the princess with you. The princess is delicate and precious, so I'm afraid she won't be able to endure much hardship. Why don't you leave her in the capital? I will take good care of her on your behalf. Of course, in order to avoid any misunderstandings, I would like to ask your Highness to write a contract so that I can properly take care of her. Song, don't go too far. Wan Liang was shocked and angry when he heard this. All these years, he had used his power to take care of many people's wives. How could he not know what the other party meant by taking care of her? Song Qing calmly smiled. Your Highness, you must think this through. Are you really going to throw your life away for a woman? Wan Liang's face darkened. The other party's words were full of malice. He knew that the other party wanted to find an excuse to kill him. So how could he dare to risk his own life? Thinking about how he had to leave the capital as soon as possible, Wan Liang knew that he would not be able to take his wife with him. Even if he didn't agree, his wife's fate would not change. Thinking about this, he felt much better. Gritting his teeth, he agreed, Fine, I will write it. At the same time, he swore to himself that when he returned to the capital with his troops, he would execute Song Qing's entire family and humiliate all of his women countless times. Only then would he be able to vent his hatred. The rest of the people who witnessed this all had strange expressions on their faces. Ouyang Feng thought that Song Qing was sometimes a gentleman, but when he was shameless, even someone like Wanyan Liang couldn't compare to him. It seemed that revenge on Guijing and Huang Rong would fall on Song Qing's shoulders. Qiu Qianren's face twitched, but he was more happy in his heart. In this chaotic world, it was useless to be a good person. Only those with better means would be able to laugh in the end. He didn't want to experience what happened today again. Although he had never been a loyal person who would be willing to do something like changing their allegiance. Empress Pei Man had a worried look on her face. She knew a thing or two about one Yinliang's petty deeds over the past few years, and now he was getting what he deserved. She was mainly shocked by Song Qing's series of ruthless methods. Before this, in her heart, Song Qing was just a perfect lover and a perfect substitute. After she was pregnant, his value could only be considered to be slightly better than nothing. She had originally wanted to be an Empress Dowager who wielded great power and authority from behind the curtains. But now it seemed that this plan was destined to fail. Tashtish began to doubt her previous judgment. Was falling into this man's hands better than falling into Wanyan Liang's hands? Chapter 9:38. Wanyan Liang's heart was filled with humiliation and resentment, but he had no other choice. In the past, he was so proud and arrogant that he felt that there were very few heroes in the world who could compare to him. But now he sadly discovered that he was just a pitiful person who was willing to sell his wife in order to live. It's done. Wanyan Liang held the knife across the necks of the two women and wrote quickly with the other hand. When he finished writing the contract, he looked as if he had aged 20 years in the blink of an eye. Song Qing stretched out his hand, and the letter in midair seemed to be pulled by an invisible force into his hand. He glanced over the contents and couldn't help but laugh. Your Highness is indeed talented in both literature and martial arts. In ancient times, there was Chao Zijian who wrote a poem in 7 steps. Today, there is the Prince of Hailing who gave his wife a gift. I believe that in 100 years, this will become a legend. Wanyan Liang felt the blood in his body roil and the veins on his head twitch. He felt a sweetness in his throat and finally couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. Song Qing's eyes narrowed. He had deliberately humiliated Wanyan Liang, waiting for this opportunity. He flicked his finger and Wanyan Liang felt the back of his hand go numb. He could no longer hold the knife in his hand, and it fell to the ground with a clang. Wanyan Liang was startled. Ignoring the burning pain in his chest, he quickly reached out to grab the two women. Unfortunately, the two women had a strong force, and he couldn't grab them. He could only watch helplessly as they flew into Song Qing's arms. Your Highness, they are your life-saving talismans. Why didn't you protect them? Song Qing held Empress Pei Man in one hand and Tashtish in the other. His voice was filled with ridicule. Wanyan Liang's face paled. At this point, he could only make one last effort. You promised to let me go. As he said this, his eyes moved to the paper in Song Qing's hands. Song Qing smiled. Of course, your Highness has already sold your wife to me. How could I not keep my promise? Go. Really? Wanyan Liang looked at him in disbelief. At this moment, he felt a surge of gratitude towards Song Qing. Of course it's true. Song Qing shrugged. Wanyan Liang hurriedly turned around and ran. Unexpectedly, he had only taken a few steps when he heard Song Qing's voice. Chief Qiu, let him run for half an incense stick's time first. Then you go and catch him. If you can't catch him, Qiu Qianren was startled. He knew that Song Qing wanted him to hand over the proof of his loyalty. Cold sweat dripped down his back as he hurriedly replied, Yes. At this time, he did not consider the problem of taking the opportunity to escape. He had seen Song Qing's heaven-defying Qinggong. Even if he was known as Iron Palm, floating on water, even if he ran until his legs broke, he would not be able to catch up with Song Qing. Wanyan Liang staggered and almost fell. He turned around, shocked and angry. Song, You going back on your word? Song Qing replied indifferently. I've already let you go as promised, but if you're captured again, then don't blame me. Instead of complaining here, it's better to run as far as possible. If you delay any longer, the time it takes for half an incense stick to burn will be over. Wang Liang almost cursed it out loud. Not to mention half an incense stick's time. Even if he ran for 3 incense sticks time first, he would not be able to outrun Qiu Qianren, whose Qinggong and iron palm were equally famous. But now that things had come to this, he had no other choice. He looked at Song Qing with hatred in his eyes and ran for his life. Ouyang Feng could not help but sigh. The new generation really surpasses the old. Brother Song, I'm afraid this old man's nickname of Western Poison is more suitable for you. Song Qing faintly smiled. Brother Ouyang is overpraising me. I have a habit. If others treat me well, I will treat them even better. If others use despicable methods to deal with me, I will be even more despicable and shameless than them. Ouyang Feng laughed. Not bad. You're very much to this old man's liking. You're much better than those hypocrites in Jianghu. Song Qing smiled and suddenly thought of something. He could not help but ask, why didn't I see Murong Bo this time? He was prepared to fight a bitter battle today. If Murong Bo was here, perhaps he would not be able to win over Ouyang Feng and Qiu Qianren so easily. Ouyang Feng replied, last time in the laundry yard, he was injured by your hands. Not long after returning, he left the Hailing King's palace. It seems like he wants to find a place to study hard and then come back to take revenge on you. Song Qing indifferently smiled. With such a potential enemy urging me, I won't slack off. Murong Bo, this person, he really did not care too much. After all, from what he did in the demigods and semi-devils, this old man's intelligence had a big problem. Even if he was given time and opportunity, he would not be able to cause any big waves. While the two of them were chatting, Qiu Qianren had already caught Wang Liang. Looking at Wang Liang's dejected look, Song Qing waved his hand expressionlessly and said, find a secret room in the Hall of Benevolence and lock him up. Objectively speaking, he didn't have much of an enmity with Wang Liang. Today's humiliation was enough for him to vent the anger in his heart. The rest would be left to goodbye, Wang Yinping and Wang Zhongjie to torment him. All right, there was also Madame Tang. I heard that Brother Ouyang's White Camel Mountain has a kind of corpse-dissolving powder. Can you lend me some? In the past, when Song Qing was chatting with Wei Xiaobao, he heard him mention that the corpse-dissolving powder seemed to come from the western region's White Camel Mountain. Song Qing could roughly guess that it was something made by Western Poison. Ouyang Feng revealed a strange expression. He took out a porcelain bottle from his bosom and handed it to Song Qing. He asked curiously, you even know this? Song Qing smiled and did not reply. He picked up the corpse-dissolving powder and dissolved Wang Liang's body. Ouyang Feng's eyelids twitched when he saw this. Why did you? Today, Wang Liang wanted to enter the palace to assassinate the emperor. Fortunately, the emperor was already aware of it. Wang Liang's plot was easily foiled, and the emperor was safe and sound. Song Qing smiled as he looked at Ouyang Feng and Qiu Qianren. Brother Ouyang, Chief Qiu, what happened today? As soon as Ouyang Feng and Qiu Qianren met Song Qing's eyes, they felt the hair on their backs stand on end. They had lived for many years and were very experienced. They immediately replied, of course it happened. We saw it with our own eyes. That's good. The two of you can find an empty house near the Hall of Benevolence to stay. Song Qing paused for a moment before continuing. I, Song Mao, have a general understanding of your desires. Once I have stabilized the court, I will definitely not mistreat the two of you. Qiu Qianren hurriedly replied, young master, please do not worry. It does not matter who the emperor of the Jin Kingdom is. I will definitely not leak this matter to anyone. This time, he even changed the way he addressed Song Qing. He had no choice but to show his loyalty. All of Wang Liang's men were dead. Other than the two women, only he and Ouyang Feng knew what happened tonight. Those two women were so beautiful that no man could bear to kill them. That left only him and Ouyang Feng. Ouyang Feng and Song Qing were friends, so he did not need to worry. But what did he have to rely on? Chapter 9:39. Strangely enough, Qiu Qianren wasn't this afraid even when facing Ouyang Feng, the Western poison. Although Ouyang Feng's martial arts were superior to his, the gap between them wasn't too big. Moreover, if he couldn't defeat Ouyang Feng, he could always run away. However, if he was facing Song Qingshu, Qiu Qianren didn't even have the confidence to escape. Therefore, he was only afraid of Ouyang Feng, but feared Song Qingshu from the bottom of his heart. Song Qingshu could roughly guess what he was thinking. Amused, he hastily consoled him with a few words, telling him and Ouyang Feng to rest in peace. Meanwhile, he led Empress Pei Man and Tadish into the emperor's bedchamber. Young master is really good at scheming. After Song Qingshu unsealed Empress Pei Man's acupoints, she couldn't help but say faintly, "Your Highness, why do you say that?" Song Qingshu asked with a smile. "I've already notified you, but you didn't show up. You watched as Wanyan Liang killed the emperor, then Wanyan Zongxian and Zongmin. Then you came out to reap the benefits. In this way, all the power of the Jin Kingdom will fall into your hands. Isn't this a good plan?" Empress Pei Man's expression was somewhat unsightly. She had already sensed from her intelligence network that there was something strange about today's situation. On one hand, she secretly strengthened her defenses, and on the other, she secretly informed Song Qingshu. In the end, she didn't expect Wanyan Liang to make such a big move. She was somewhat unprepared. After several fires in the palace, her influence in the palace had probably been wiped out. The left Prime Minister Wanyan Zongmin had also died. She had lost her greatest ally in the court, and her control over the court had dropped to a freezing point. More importantly, her greatest political asset was her position as the empress. Now that the Emperor Wanyan was dead, how could she still be the empress? Song Qingshu was silent. All of this was indeed within his plan. He had borrowed Wanyan Liang's blade to wipe out the upper echelons of the Jin Kingdom and then come out to reap the fruits of his labor. He had no regrets about this. According to Empress Pei Man's plan, he was just a breeding person. Once she got pregnant and had the legal right to inherit the throne, he would have no value. Based on their interactions over the past few days, Empress Pei Man was a person with a strong desire for power and control. At that time, it was hard to say if she would still tolerate him. Seeing him tacitly agree, Empress Pei Man felt even more upset. She coldly said, "However, no matter how much you calculated, you didn't consider one thing." "What is it?" Song Qingshu asked curiously. "Although you swept away all the power centers, now that the emperor has passed away, according to the rules, the throne will be succeeded by Prince Su, Wanyan Yong. In the end, you're just helping someone else." Empress Pei Man's face revealed a strange flush. It was clear that she was very happy to see Song Qingshu miscalculate. "Who said the emperor has passed away?" Song Qingshu smiled strangely. He took out a mask from his bosom and put it on. Suddenly, it was Wanyan Liang standing there. "You?" Empress Pei Man pointed at him. She was so shocked that she didn't know what to say. Only then did she remember that he had been pretending to be Tang Quobian. No one in the capital had recognized him. "So you planned everything." Song Qingshu reached out and hooked her chin. A playful smile appeared on his face. "Let's cooperate. From now on, I will be the emperor and you will continue to be the empress. We will jointly wield the power of the Jin Kingdom. What do you think? How can I refuse?" Empress Pei Man laughed bitterly. She had been in the palace for so long that she was no longer a naive girl. The other party's words were pleasant to hear, that they would jointly wield the power of the Jin Kingdom. But this time, he took the opportunity to cut off her two arms. When the time came, she would be alone. Apart from the title of empress, she would have no power to speak of. However, she didn't refuse. After all, this was already the best outcome. If she angered the other party, she wasn't sure if she would be able to keep her life. After all, the emperor and several ministers had already died. Another empress' death wouldn't be a big deal. Tadish sat by the side and witnessed everything. Her heart was surging with monstrous waves. She understood that since the other party had exposed such a shameful secret to her, it would be hard for her to escape death. Empress Pei Man also noticed her. She pulled out a dagger and walked towards her. Today's matter is of great importance. I will kill this slut first. Because of her identity as Madame Peach Blossom, Empress Pei Man had always been jealous of her. She wanted nothing more than to get rid of her. Tatia's face paled. Now that things had come to this, she had nothing to fear. She closed her eyes. However, she didn't feel the pain she expected. Instead, she heard Song Qingshu's voice. I only have one use for her. Empress Pei Man angrily retorted. What use? Don't tell me you are also coveting this slut's beauty? She had fought with Madame Peach Blossom for more than 10 years. She didn't want to continue fighting with another man. I don't think I need to explain too much to you. If you want to think that way, then so be it, Song Qingshu coldly said. Empress Pei Man was alarmed. Worried that she had really angered him, she could only sheathe her dagger and sulk. Song Qingshu didn't say anything else. He sat on the throne that only Wan Yinling had the right to sit on. He closed his eyes and rested, as if waiting for some news. Not long after, news came from the palace. When Pucha and Ahut's soldiers heard that Wan Yinliang's side had been defeated, they lost their will to fight. They all laid down their weapons and surrendered. Pucha and Ahut quickly seized control of the palace and hurried to the Hall of Benevolence to pay his respects to the emperor. Song Qingshu casually said a few words to him, then sent him to stabilize the palace. Throughout the entire process, Pucha and Ahut didn't notice anything amiss. They didn't know that the emperor had changed. Wan Yinping also sent news. She led the army of the northern barracks and defeated Wan Yinliang's troops. She was now sweeping up the remnants of the Hailing Empire's faction in the capital. So many things had happened that night. The streets and alleys of the capital were filled with soldiers. How could the court not know that something big had happened? However, the situation was unclear in the middle of the night. Coupled with the fact that the soldiers were everywhere, everyone was worried that they might get into trouble. As a result, they all unanimously decided to close their doors and protect themselves. However, everyone was guessing what had happened. They even began to wonder if the morning court would be held as usual. Dang, dang, dang. As the sky began to brighten, the ringing of the bell to summon the officials came from the imperial palace, answering their doubts. Along the way, they whispered to each other in twos and threes, guessing what had happened last night. Finally, when they found that the top few seats in the imperial court were all empty, they were even more shocked. After everyone had arrived, Song Qingshu walked out in the guise of Wan Yinling. He looked at the scene of His Highness kneeling down and the crowd shouting, "Long live the Emperor." Even though he had experienced this in the Qin Kingdom, he couldn't help but feel excited. Chapter 940. During the morning court session, Song Qing recounted yesterday's events in Wan Yinshui's tone. The Prince of Hailing, Wan Yinliang, had plotted to rebel and killed Duke Yu, the Shangling, the Commander-in-Chief Wan Yanzongxian, the King of Chao, and the Left Prime Minister Wan Yanzongmin. Just as he was about to succeed, Tang Kuobian, Pucha, and Ahu appeared and crushed the prince's plot. Next, he began to reward them according to their contributions. Tang Kuobian, the Left Prime Minister and Commandant of the Horse, had saved the emperor's life and was promoted to Commander, Commandant of the Imperial Army, and was conferred the title of Duke of Qin. Because he was seriously injured in saving the emperor last night, he was allowed to stay at home to recuperate and not have to attend court in the morning. The left Deputy Commandant of the Imperial Army, Pu Cha, was promoted to Commandant of the Imperial Palace and was conferred the title of Duke of Chu. The head of the Imperial Palace, De Xing, died in battle while protecting the emperor yesterday and was conferred the title of Duke of Dingtao. The washing brothel was re-established and Wan Yinping was appointed as the commander. As for Wan Yinliang and his accomplices, they were temporarily thrown into prison and handed over to the Ministry of Justice to be investigated and given the corresponding charges. In order to reassure the people, Empress Pei Man was also present at the morning court session. She had originally doubted Song Qing's ability to control the situation. After all, not everyone could withstand the emperor's coercion. Qin Huang had dared to kill people at the age of 13, but after seeing the Prince of Qin, he had been paralyzed with fear. In the end, Song Qing's performance was far beyond her expectations. If she hadn't known that he was in disguise, she would have thought that Wanyan Shui had come back to life and was sitting on the throne with ease. After thinking about it, Empress Peiman could only attribute it to the training she had done for him in the past. She had no idea that he had already been a real emperor countless times. After the court session was dismissed, Gebai and Wanyan Ping were already waiting for him at the Hall of Benevolence. Their expressions were somewhat unsightly. Song Qing waved his hand to signal the eunuchs and palace maids to leave. They could no longer bear it and asked, why did Imperial Brother die without a corpse? Even though their brother-sister relationship had faded over the years, and the sisters were bitterly disappointed with Wanyan Sun after Tang Quobian was imprisoned, Wanyan Sun was still their brother. It was difficult for them to accept his fate. Song Qing took off his mask and smiled bitterly. If people know that Wanyan Shui is dead, the Jin Kingdom will be in chaos. I don't think you want to see that happen. Wanyan Ping glared at him. Are you the one who wants to replace me as the emperor? Song Qing smiled and said, that's right. I don't deny it. I do want to take this opportunity to control the power of the Jin Kingdom. However, this isn't a bad thing for you. After all, I'm using Wanyan Shui's identity as the emperor, so I can keep the emperor's bloodline in your hands. Gebai knew that what he said made sense. After all, Wanyan Shui was dead. If the emperor's bloodline fell, the previous dynasties had learned their lesson. The bloodline of the previous emperor would suffer a terrible fate. Even if the successor was a benevolent emperor, he would still suppress them for the sake of the throne. But, even though it made sense, the two sisters still felt that it was a bit strange. Wanyan Ping raised her head and saw Empress Peiman, who was watching the show from the side. She immediately became angry and said sarcastically, sister-in-law, you really don't let Imperial Brother down. Empress Peiman blushed. Even though she didn't care about Wanyan Shui, it was still embarrassing for her sister-in-law to see their affair. However, she wasn't someone who was easy to bully. She immediately retorted, didn't your sister also let Tang Quobian down? And you, didn't you also find a brother-in-law for your Imperial brother? How do you not let him down? If word gets out that you two sisters are working together, you'll be even more embarrassing than sister-in-law. She had sharp eyes and could immediately see that Wanyan Ping was no longer a virgin. Looking at how close she was to Song Qing, it wasn't hard to guess their relationship. Wanyan Ping's face immediately turned red. She was still a young girl and couldn't be as open as Peiman, who had been married for many years. She couldn't say anything after a few words. Song Qing laughed and hugged them. Don't struggle. If word gets out that sister-in-law and sister-in-law are sleeping together, it won't be a good thing. In this way, not to mention the Gebai sisters, even Peiman couldn't bear it. The three women immediately united and clasped their fists at Song Qing. After fooling around for a while, Song Qing said, in the near future, I will start building the Imperial Mausoleum. When the time comes, I will bury your Imperial brother inside, so that he can rest in peace. In the future, there will be a memorial tablet for him in the Imperial Ancestral Temple, so that he can enjoy incense for all eternity. Most emperors would build their own mausoleums when they were alive, so no one would object to his suggestion. As for enjoying incense for all eternity, he knew that there was no such thing as an eternal dynasty. He only said this to comfort the two sisters. As expected, after Gebai and Wanyan Ping heard this, their expressions softened. In order to divert their attention, Song Qing took the opportunity to say, Wanyan Liang killed Tang Quobian and Wanyan Shui. They're your closest relatives. Before, I promised you that I would help you take revenge. Now I have done it. Wanyan Liang is currently imprisoned in a secret room in the laundry yard. You can take revenge however you want and torture him however you want. However, leave him alive. After all, he has committed the crime of treason and will be publicly executed. Don't worry, letting him die now is letting him off lightly. How can there be such a good thing in the world? Wanyan Ping said hatefully. Every country's punishment for treason was extremely harsh and cruel. She naturally hoped that Wang Yinliang would enjoy this process. After the three women left, not long after, Pucha Ali Hu and Wanyan Zhongjie came to the palace to seek an audience. Young master is really generous. Seeing Song Qing in his dragon robes, Pucha Ali Hu was first shocked, then her expression became extremely complicated. Song Qing smiled. He didn't hide it from her, because when Wanyan Zhongjie was protecting Goodbye, he had more or less seen something he shouldn't have. The mother and daughter were so smart that they would figure it out sooner or later. It was better to lay all his cards on the table and get rid of this hidden danger. After the coup last night, Taizu's bloodline and the royal family's power had been greatly weakened. Taizong's bloodline had suffered the least. Of the three great clans, the Tudun clan was doomed. Only the Pucha clan and the Tranquil clan were left. The Tranquil clan was needless to say, so the Pucha clan and Taizong's bloodline were his next targets. Zhongjie and her daughter were the best middlemen. Pucha Ali, who was from the Pucha clan, and Wanyan Zhongjie was the first wife's daughter of Taizong's first wife. Their dual identities gave them a natural advantage. The biggest problem now was how to ensure their loyalty. Chapter 941. In order to ensure the loyalty of Wanyan Zhongjie and his daughter, it was impossible to rely solely on the three-corpse divine brain pill to control them. Song Qing also didn't want to keep a ticking time bomb by his side. Who knew when it would bite back at him? The best way was to make them his allies, but no matter how much Song Qing thought about it, he could not think of a good way. As the saying goes, show mercy and show mercy. He had used enough pressure before, so now it was time to show mercy. I promised you that I would help you get revenge on Wang Yinliang. Now I have done it. Not only has Wang Yinliang lost his reputation, but his family has also been consigned to eternal damnation. Song Qing could not help but sigh. Wang Yinliang was really his lucky star. He had given his wife to him and helped him increase his favorability. Song Qing was a bit reluctant to see him die. Thank you, young master. You are our benefactor. Please accept our bow. Pucha Elihu pulled his daughter down and bowed. Song Qing hurriedly went to help them up. Madam, you are too kind. I didn't overthrow Wang Yinliang just for you. I also did it for my own benefit. I'm not worthy of your gratitude. He knew that this was a wise woman. Under her enchanting and charming appearance, there was a clear heart. Playing too many tricks in front of her would have the opposite effect. It was better to admit it directly and leave a magnanimous impression. Pucha Elihu unnaturally retracted her hand and blushed. Young master, there's no need to be so modest. No matter what, it is an indisputable fact that you helped us get revenge. We will naturally not forget this kindness. In his previous world, this was normal physical contact even during work. Song Qing did not notice it earlier, but after seeing her unnatural reaction, he realized that something was wrong. At the same time, he could not help but feel a bit strange. Her hand was as soft and smooth as a young girl's. Pucha Elihu had trained her eyes over the years, and the change in Song Qing heart did not escape her eyes. As a result, her expression became even more unnatural. Song Qing coughed. In order to divert the awkwardness, he hurriedly said, Now that Wang Yinliang is imprisoned in the imperial palace, you must be very interested in seeing him. Of course, this bastard's father caused my grandfather and father to be killed unjustly, and he bullied my mother. I have to settle the score with him. Wanyan Zhongjie gnashed his teeth and said. Song Qing replied, Don't worry. Your grandfather and father were framed by Wanyan Zhonggan for treason. Now that Wanyan Liang has committed treason, everyone related to him will be investigated accordingly. Wanyan Zhonggan is no exception. As for your father's case, I will also pass down a decree to clear their names. Really? Wanyan Zhongjie looked at him with surprise. Looking at her sparkling big eyes, Song Qing couldn't help but laugh. Of course it's true. Why would I lie to you? The first few times he met her, she always appeared as a cool female assassin, which made him almost forget that she was also a young girl. Thank you. Wang Yanzhongjie suddenly revealed an embarrassed expression. I've been secretly scolding you lately. I'm really sorry. Song Qingshu was speechless. What do you usually scold me about? Wang Yanzhongjie's face turned slightly red, and she stammered, I didn't scold anything. I just complained a bit. Noticing Song Qingshu's suspicious gaze, she hardened her heart and said, Humph, you were the one who used such an insidious drug to control me and my mother. Can I scold you a bit? I don't mind. Song Qingshu shrugged his shoulders. There was no way he would argue with a young girl. Moreover, there were many people in the world who scolded him. So what if there was another young girl? Pucha Elihu was worried that his daughter would be too outspoken and say something that would offend Song Qingshu, so he hurriedly interrupted. Benefactor, I have a presumptuous request. I don't know if Benefactor will agree to it. Song Qingshu smiled slightly. Madam, please speak. As long as it's within my power, I will definitely do my best. He was currently thinking of a way to pull the mother and daughter onto the same boat, so he naturally wouldn't let go of this opportunity to show his kindness. That's right, madam. There's no need to call me Benefactor in the future. Just call me Qingshu. Yes, Benefactor. Pucha Elihu smiled noncommittally. Song Qingshu felt a bit helpless and could only let her be. What do you want me to help you with? Pucha Elihu suddenly revealed a hesitant expression. This matter isn't difficult, but it's not simple either. I'm just afraid that Benefactor won't be willing to help. What is it? What is it, madam? Why don't you tell me? Seeing her hesitation, Song Qingshu's interest was immediately piqued. Pucha Elihu's full chest heaved slightly, clearly brewing her emotions. After a long time, she said, Benefactor, you know what happened to me in the past. The main culprit was Wanyan Liang. It could be said that he destroyed my family and destroyed my happiness. This enmity is absolutely irreconcilable. Now that he's involved in a rebellion, he will naturally receive the cruelest punishment from the imperial court. If I make a fuss about physical punishment, I'll just be displaying my slight skill in front of an expert. It will be very difficult to cause any real harm to him. Song Qingshu gradually understood. Madam, what do you mean? Pucha Elihu pursed her lips and slowly said, Since physical punishment won't be able to cause any harm to him, I'll destroy him mentally. Destroy mentally? Song Qingshu was startled. He couldn't help but ask doubtfully, Madam, what method do you have to cause mental harm to him? Pucha Elihu's face reddened. That's why I need Benefactor's help. How can I help? Seeing the shyness and embarrassment on her face, Song Qingshu thought to himself, why is this not right? That beast, Wanyan Liang, bullied me in front of my husband's mourning hall. At the same time, he proudly pointed at my late husband's memorial tablet and said many, many unbearable things, so I plan to pay him back. Doesn't he like to bully other people's wives in front of their husbands? I'll let him have a taste of that. Song Qingshu finally reacted. He looked at her in shock. Madam, you can't possibly want me to be quiet. Pucha Elihu's legs bent, and she knelt down in front of him, her voice choked with sobs. I know that this request is very difficult for Benefactor, but I really can't think of any other way to take revenge. I hope that Benefactor can help me. Song Qingshu had an awkward expression. Even though he would occasionally fantasize about such a scenario, this was too hurtful. Although he didn't lack ridiculous actions, he more or less had a bottom line. Even the Golden Snake Camp and Jiao Wan didn't let Luo Liru know the truth. Although it was somewhat hypocritical, but after the matter, whether it was Jiao Waner or Luo Liru, the damage was minimized. End of this chapter. Chapter 942. Song Qingshu felt a headache coming on. Pucha Elihu's request was clearly different. He wanted Wanyan Liang to see it with his own eyes in order to achieve his revenge. This was a bit too much. As if seeing through Song Qingshu's refusal, Pucha Elihu bit her lips and threw out a bargaining chip that Song Qingshu found hard to refuse. As long as Benefactor helps me this time, I and my daughter will repay Benefactor's great kindness, even if we have to work like an ox or a horse in the future. Yes, yes, yes. Song Qingshu's heart skipped a beat. He looked at Pucha Elihu's charming and mature face, then at the young and beautiful Wanyan Zhongjia standing to the side. His heartbeat sped up uncontrollably. Pucha Elihu continued, "If I'm not wrong, Benefactor will need to win over the Pucha family and the princes of Taizong's lineage if you want to gain complete control of the court. I and Zhongjia can help Benefactor solve this problem." When Song Qingshu heard this, he realized that he had misunderstood. He secretly despised himself. But who knew how many men in Daxing Manor secretly coveted this pair of beautiful orphan and widowed mother? So it was quite normal for him to misunderstand. I need to think about this. Although Pucha Elihu's proposal was very tempting, Song Qingshu didn't immediately agree. After all, this matter was too unimaginable. He had no choice but to use the delaying tactic. Because Gubai and Wanyan Ping had already gone to find Wanyan Liang, Pucha Elihu and Zhongjia couldn't go to the laundry for the time being. They had no choice but to stay in the palace for a while, so they took the opportunity to visit some of the imperial concubines. The Pucha family had a marriage alliance with the imperial family, and Wanyan Zhongjia was a descendant of Taizong's lineage. He was related to many people in the palace, but because he had lost power in the past, he rarely went to the palace. Now that he had Song Qingshu as his backer, he could finally visit friends in the palace. After visiting a few people, Pucha Elihu took advantage of the time when no one was looking to pull his daughter aside and say, "Mother plans to find an opportunity to marry you to him." Wanyan Zhongjia was stunned. "Marry who?" Pucha Elihu glared at his daughter. "Who are you going to marry?" Wanyan Zhongjia finally reacted and his face turned red. "Why should I marry him? Do you really have to use this kind of method to repay your kindness?" Pucha stroked his daughter's head dotingly and sighed faintly. "Do you think I'm doing this to repay you? Isn't it?" Wanyan Zhongjia couldn't help but twitch her mouth. She had been curious about Tang Quobian's mysteriousness, and later, she was convinced by Song Qingshu's strength. At the same time, she was very grateful that he had avenged her and her daughter. But these favorable impressions weren't enough to make her want to marry him. Of course not. Pucha Elihu shook his head. "We're orphans and widows. In the end, we can't support a family. You'll have to marry eventually. Now that the power of the imperial court has fallen into his hands, marrying him will ensure the glory of our family for generations to come. It might even surpass the glory of your grandfather and father. And on the surface, our relationship with him is very good, but it's clear that he doesn't trust us. No one knows what will happen in the future. Only through marriage can we completely set him at ease. At the same time, it will ensure our safety. Also, you don't want the 3-corpse brain pill to act up in your body, do you?" Even though Pucha Elihu had seen many things in her life, she still paled at the thought of that terrifying pill. Wanyan Zhongjia's expression was also a little ugly. She couldn't help but snort. "I don't believe that he'll be so heartless as to not give us the antidote when the time comes." Pucha Elihu recalled Song Qingshu's handsome face and clear eyes. She actually agreed with her daughter's judgment. However, she wasn't a teenage girl after all. When she made decisions, she was more cautious and rational. She wasn't willing to put everything on some illusory feeling. "Actually, what I said to you just now wasn't the real reason. The reason why I'm so anxious for you to marry him." Pucha Elihu paused and didn't explain directly. Instead, she changed the topic. Although he's now the emperor of the Jin Kingdom, he's destined to only be the emperor as Wanyan Shi. In the future, the throne will eventually be passed on to the descendants of the Wanyan clan. But since he's the emperor, why would he pass the throne to someone who has nothing to do with him? So the biggest possibility is that he'll pass the throne to his own son in the end. However, Gubai and Wanyan Ping also know that he's pretending to be the emperor. Although they love Song Qingshu so much that they won't expose his identity, they definitely aren't willing to become the eternal sinners of the Wanyan clan and let the throne fall into the hands of someone else. If Mother's predictions are correct, in the end, the two sides will definitely choose a method that satisfies both sides. That is to pass the throne to a prince who is both Song Qingshu's son and also has the Wanyan clan's bloodline. Wanyan Zhongjie was confused and subconsciously replied, "Mother, you're really far-sighted. But what does this have to do with me?" Pucha Elihu really wanted to give his daughter a good beating and knock on her head. His daughter was smart, but she used all her intelligence on martial arts and weird stuff. She was born into the royal family, but she knew nothing about politics. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Of course it's related. Pucha Elihu hurriedly explained. Based on the current situation, Goodbye, Wan Yinping, and Song Qingshu have the closest relationship. If nothing unexpected happens, one of their sons, or Song Qingshu's sons, will be chosen to inherit the throne. However, Goodbye's husband is Tang Quobian in name, so it's very difficult to hide this from the public. Thus, the greatest possibility is still Wan Yinping and Song Qingshu's son. But there are no absolutes in this world. Wan Yinping has the imperial bloodline, but aren't you also of the imperial bloodline? As the granddaughter of Emperor Taizong's first wife, if you and Song Qingshu have a son, whether it's in terms of bloodline or legal principles, your right to inherit the throne won't be lower than Wan Yinping's sons. So it doesn't matter who is chosen to be the emperor in the end. What will affect the final result is Song Qingshu's preferences and preferences. Zhongjie, you've inherited mother's beauty, and it seems like you're going to surpass your mother. In this aspect, you have an innate advantage over Wan Yinping. When the time comes, you just have to work hard to win Song Qingshu's favor. How can Wan Yinping compete with you? Wanyan Zhongjie was dumbstruck. She hadn't been able to figure this out before, not because she was stupid, but because her mind wasn't on the matter. Now that her mother had seen through her, she instantly understood the stakes and couldn't help but admire her mother's foresight. Chapter 943. Pucha Elihu's expression froze, and she couldn't react for a moment. What did you miscalculate? Wanyan Zhongjie mimicked her expression and sighed deeply. Mother, have you forgotten that my surname is Wanyan? Yes, so what? Pucha Elihu was confused. Right now, Song Qingshu's identity is Wanyan Shui. According to seniority, he's my uncle. How am I supposed to marry him? Wanyan Zhongjie tilted his head and looked at his mother. Pucha Elihu's expression finally changed. It turned out that she had subconsciously been thinking about her daughter and Song Qingshu's marriage, but she had forgotten that Song Qingshu's true identity could not be revealed. His public identity was Wanyan Shi, so how could he take a niece from the same clan into the palace as a concubine? As for Wan Yinping, this wasn't a problem because she was Wanyan Shi's biological sister. As a princess, she lived in the palace. Who would know what they did in the palace? After she got pregnant, they could casually place their son under the name of a concubine. The entire palace would be under their control, so how would the court officials know? Was she really going to miss this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity? Pucha Elihu wasn't willing. A crafty smile suddenly appeared on Wanyan Zhongjie's face. Mother, it's not like there's no way. What way? Pucha Elihu's eyes lit up and she hurriedly asked. Wanyan Zhongjie put his hands behind his back and tiptoed to his mother's ear. Mother, although I can't marry into the palace, you don't have this restriction. You can marry him. I don't mind having a younger brother. With that, he ran away while giggling. Pucha Elihu's expression became very interesting. Her charming oval face flushed red as she angrily said, You damned girl, how dare you make fun of your mother? Wanyan Zhongjie was a martial artist. Even if he didn't use his lightness skill, Pucha Elihu wouldn't be able to catch up to him. Seeing her daughter giggle and disappear without a trace, Pucha Elihu stomped her feet angrily like a young girl. However, after calming down, she suddenly became absent-minded. Entering the palace by herself might be a solution. She and Wanyan Laoshi was not related by blood and had been single for many years. According to the customs of the Jin kingdom, it was normal for a woman to remarry, so she did not encounter much resistance when she entered the palace. Furthermore, she was from the Pucha family, and a marriage alliance would tie the interests of both parties even more tightly. Of course, she wasn't really going to marry Song Qingshu. It was just a cover. After all, Even if she really gave birth to a son for Song Qing-shu, without the Wanyan bloodline, how could he have a right to fight for the throne with Wanyan Ping's son? The matter of having a son with Song Qing-shu still fell to Zhong Jie. Pucha Elihu thought it through clearly. Since Zhong Jie couldn't enter the palace openly, then everything could only be done in secret. After she entered the palace as a concubine, Zhong Jie would be able to enter the palace regularly to visit her. She would have more opportunities to interact with Song Qing-shu, and other people in the capital wouldn't suspect anything. Moreover, there was another advantage. After Zhong Jie gave birth to a son for Song Qing-shu, her identity as a concubine could cover up the legitimacy of the child's identity. But this way, Zhong Jie's sacrifice is a little too great. Pucha Elihu sighed faintly. She stood where she was with an expression of incomparable hesitation. At this time, in the Hall of Benevolence, Song Qing-shu looked at the elegant woman kneeling in front of the palace and said apologetically, "I have already pardoned the sins of your relatives. At the same time, as compensation, I will take you into the palace and confer you the title of imperial concubine." In the Jin Kingdom's concubine system, the 4 concubines under the empress were imperial concubine Yuan, imperial concubine Zhao, and imperial concubine Li. Imperial concubine ranked second among the 4 concubines and could be said to be one of the most distinguished women in the harem. Now that Zhong Jie was the wife of the traitor Wanyan Liang, according to the normal system, she should be executed. She should even be exiled to the army as a slave. Therefore, Song Qing-shu's offer was quite sincere. Tu Danjing was at a loss. In the end, she sighed deeply and said, "I don't know why I betrayed my husband and single-mindedly helped you, causing him to end up like this. Sigh, now that things have come to this, there's no use regretting it. If you can arrange a Buddhist room in the palace for me to spend the rest of my life in peace, I will be very grateful." She did not seek death, nor did she refuse the imperial concubine's offer. After all, she had the Tu Danjing family behind her. Because of her this time, her family was almost destroyed. Now, the only thing she could do for her family was the title of imperial concubine. After all, with this relationship, the Tu Danjing family would not be exterminated. She did not expect to leave the palace. After all, she knew so many secrets. It was already very kind of him not to kill her. How could he really let her go out of sight? At the same time, Tu Danjing was also full of guilt towards her husband. How could she be Song Qing-shu's concubine with a clear conscience? After thinking about it, she felt that the most suitable ending for her was to spend the rest of her life alone in the palace. Apparently, Song Qing-shu also guessed her thoughts. He nodded without any hesitation and said, "Okay." He could do anything to Wanyan Liang, but from the beginning to the end, he still felt very guilty towards Tu Danjing. This ending was good for everyone. Song Qing-shu thought of Zhong Jie and her daughter's revenge plan. After hesitating for a moment, he called out to Tu Danjing, who was about to leave, and said, "In the future, I will try not to disturb you. However, I want you to accompany me tonight. Take it as a farewell." Tu Danjing's face turned red. She did not expect him to make such a request. However, since she had accepted the position of imperial concubine, it was natural for her to sleep with the emperor. She hesitated for a moment before nodding slightly and replying in a soft voice, "As you wish." Of course, Song Qing-shu would not be so cruel as to hurt her again. However, if Zhong Jie and her daughter wanted to take revenge, they had to let Wanyan Liang know about the whole thing. As such, they could only hide it from Tu Danjing and let her cooperate unknowingly. As long as she never knew the truth, she would never be hurt. When night fell, Song Qing-shu carried the blindfolded disciple Danjing into the laundry yard. No one knew what had happened during this time. They only knew that Pucha, Elihu, and Wanyan Zhongjie had left the imperial palace with flushed faces. At the same time, there was no longer that gloomy expression on their faces. Over the next few days, Song Qing-shu methodically took over the power of the court. He placed his trusted aides in all the key departments and filled the power vacuum caused by the coup that night. One day, while he was reading through the memorials, someone suddenly came to report that Wanyan Liang's top strategist, Xiao Yu, wanted to use an enormous secret to protect his life. End of this chapter. Chapter 944. On the night of the coup, Xiao Yu was sent by Wanyan Liang to work with Pucha and Ahu to take control of the Imperial Guard. Just as they were about to succeed, the left assistant inspector Pucha Ahu returned with his troops. After a bitter battle, Pucha Ahu was defeated and his troops surrendered. Xiao Yu was also captured. Because he was one of the masterminds behind the coup, Xiao Yu knew that his fate would be extremely miserable. In his desperation, he finally thought of a way to save his life. He hurriedly told the interrogating official that he knew an enormous secret, hoping to use this secret to save his life. The interrogating official didn't dare to be negligent and quickly reported the matter to Song Qing-shu. At first, Song Qing-shu didn't think much of it. After all, in a desperate situation, a person would do anything to save his life. Moreover, he had Tu Danjing as his trump card. In addition, he also had Ouyang Feng and Qiu Qianren. What secret did Wanyan Liang have that he didn't know? Later on, he thought that since he had time, he might as well listen to what Xiao Yu, Wanyan Liang's #1 confidant, had to say. Very quickly, Xiao Yu was brought to the Hall of Benevolence. Song Qing-shu drank a mouthful of tea served by a palace maid and indifferently said, "Speak, what is your so-called earth-shattering secret?" Song Qing-shu couldn't help but think of a joke from his previous life. It was said that a certain person would dream of an earth-shattering secret every night, but when he woke up, he couldn't remember anything. In order to find out what this earth-shattering secret was, that person specially prepared a pen and paper by his bedside. When he dreamed of the earth-shattering secret again, he immediately got up and wrote it down before falling asleep again. When that person woke up the next day, he only saw 6 words on the paper. Bananas are yellow. Song Qing-shu secretly thought that if Xiao Yu dared to use this secret to deceive him, he would immediately find a few black-hearted uncles from the capital and let him know how chrysanthemums turned into sunflowers. Xiao Yu revealed a hesitant expression and said, "I don't know if this sinner will be magnanimous and spare this sinner's life if I tell him." In fact, up until now, he still did not understand how Wanyan Liang, who had clearly controlled everything that night, managed to turn the tables. As for Wanyan Rui's resurrection, he didn't have any suspicions. After all, people of status would often prepare a few substitutes for themselves. That night, he was probably careless and fell for Wanyan Rui's trick. Song Qing-shu replied indifferently, "That depends on whether your so-called secret is that valuable or not. If you want to say it quickly. I don't have that much time." Xiao Yu revealed a conflicted expression. He knew that he no longer had the capital to bargain. He could only grit his teeth and say, "This matter concerns the Mongolian Ruyang Manor's princess Xiaomin. I don't know if this secret is enough to exchange for this lowly one's life." Xiaomin? Song Qing-shu's expression changed. The change in his expression did not escape Xiao Yu's eyes. Xiao Yu immediately let out a long sigh of relief. It seemed that his life was saved. "Tell me, as long as what you say is true, I can spare your life." Song Qing-shu's interest was immediately piqued. What kind of secret did it have to do with Xiaomin? "Your Majesty, you should still remember what happened in the laundry yard, right?" Xiao Yu probed. Song Qing-shu gave a non-committal grunt of agreement. Xiao Yu could only continue, "I presume your Majesty already knows that it was the Hailing Mausoleum, that Wanyan Liang sent people to do it. However, we weren't the only ones there that day. There was also Princess Xiaomin." Song Qing-shu couldn't help but reveal a disappointed expression. He had been at the scene that day and knew more than Xiao Yu. This fellow still wanted to use this to exchange for his life. As if sensing his thoughts, Xiao Yu immediately became anxious. He hurriedly said, "Because Zhao Min suddenly appeared, Wanyan Liang commissioned me to thoroughly investigate this matter. Afterwards, I finally found some clues. It turns out that Prince Su, Wanyan Yong, invited Zhao Min over. He wanted to borrow the strength of the Mongolians to help him seize the throne." In Xiao Yu's view, All emperors cared about their own throne the most. If he spoke of this matter, he would be able to help Wang Yin get rid of a huge hidden danger and save his insignificant life. There was absolutely no problem at all. Who knew that Song Qing-shu would have a disinterested expression? That's it. Although he was very disappointed, Xiao Yu's reminder reminded him of Prince Su's matter. Leaving such an ambitious person in the capital would be a disaster sooner or later. Thus, he would make use of Xiao Yu's testimony and this opportunity to catch him in one fell swoop. Seeing Song Qingshu's reaction, Xiao Yu's heart went cold. What was going on? Why didn't he care about this at all? Then why had he revealed an interested expression before? Wait a minute. Xiao Yu hurriedly recalled the details of their conversation. Suddenly, his eyes brightened. From start to finish, Prince Su had been interested in the Mongolian princess, Xiao Min. Someone, come and take him away, Song Qingshu said impatiently. He waved his hand. Yes. Imperial bodyguards had already rushed in. These bodyguards had been handpicked by Song Qingshu. Most of them were the younger generation of the Tranquil family. With Song Bai and Tang Kuo's status, the Tranquil family was relatively reliable. Wait a minute, Xiao Yu hurriedly shouted. Your Imperial Majesty, this lowly one has news regarding Princess Xiao Min. Oh. Song Qingshu waved his hand, indicating for the bodyguards to leave for the time being. Xiao Yu broke out in a cold sweat. This time, he didn't dare to be negligent. He quickly said, this lowly one has investigated many ways and found out that Princess Xiao Min didn't come to the Jin Kingdom for Prince Su. It seems that her main goal is to investigate a person called Murong Jingwei, and this lowly one just happens to know the whereabouts of Murong Jingwei. At first, Song Qingshu was a little impatient. He thought to himself, why is this person saying things that I already know? But when he heard the last sentence, he immediately sat up straight. What? You know the whereabouts of Murong Jingwei? It should be known that Murong Jingwei was not only related to the antidote for the 3-corpse divine pill that Zhao Min was poisoned with, but he was also Icy Snow's husband's murderer. All these years, everyone had been investigating his whereabouts. Unfortunately, this person was elusive and never revealed a single flaw. Even when they found out that he was disguised as Ping Yiji, it was only a coincidence. It didn't really find anything. Xiao Yu was taken aback. He thought to himself, you weren't so excited when you heard about Prince Su and Princess Xiao Min. Why are you so interested in a person from Jianghu? But he didn't have time to think too much. He subconsciously replied, Your Majesty, you also know that this lowly one was originally a member of the Shi clan of Liao. During the war between Liao and Liao, many people were captured and brought to the Jin Kingdom. Finally, they settled down here. When Murong Jingwei was seriously injured and was stranded in Liao, I coincidentally saved him. He was grateful to me for saving his life. He once told me that if I need help in the future, I can find him somewhere. In the end, not long after, a war broke out between the two countries, and I was captured and brought to the Jin Kingdom. Song Qingshu immediately asked. He said that if you need help, where can you find him? Recently, the follow-up plot is somewhat stuck, so the speed of the update has not been fast. These 2 days, there seems to be a faint feeling that my acupuncture point has been broken. It should be solved soon. I still remember what I owe. End of this chapter. Chapter 945. Xiao Yu was completely dumbfounded. As matters stood, how could he not know that the person Song Qingshu was truly interested in was not Prince Su, Wang Yin, nor the Mongolian princess Xiao Min, but Murong Jingwei. When I saved him back then, it was just a small effort. I didn't take his words to heart, so I don't remember going to the place he mentioned. Xiao Yu's back was drenched in sweat. He wanted to find an excuse to bluff his way out of this. But as soon as he met Song Qingshu's eyes, he felt as if he had been seen through from the outside to the inside. How could he dare to play any tricks? You don't remember? Song Qingshu was almost angered to death. What was the difference between this and not saying anything? Xiao Yu also knew that it would be difficult to stay alive with such an ambiguous piece of information. So he hurriedly added, Although I don't remember the specific location, I still remember the place that he mentioned. Melson. Oh, point is in Liao's Shangjing. In the end, Song Qingshu still spared Xiao Yu's life, but he didn't let him go because he might need him in the future. Shangjing. Looking at Xiao Yu's departing figure, Song Qingshu fell into deep thought. Logically speaking, Murong Jingyue was a despicable and shameless person. It was hard to imagine that such an evil person would know how to repay a debt of gratitude. However, according to Xiao Yu's description of that year, that was probably when Murong Jingyue was at his lowest. In his most desperate situation, he received help from others. This kindness was probably something that he would never forget. Although Murong Jingyue was an evil person, he was still human and had all kinds of human emotions. Moreover, according to his disguise as Ping Yiji, it was likely that he had other disguises. Shangjing in Liao was far away from the Central Plains, away from the Murong family and the Poison Hand King of medicine's sphere of influence. It was simply the perfect hiding place for Murong Jingyue. Thinking that after such a long time, whether it was icy snow, the Murong family, or even the resourceful Riyang mansion, Song Qingshu understood that his hiding place was not an ordinary one. As the saying goes, a small hermit hides in the wild, a medium hermit hides in the city, and a great hermit hides in the imperial court. He even suspected that Murong Jingyue was hiding in the imperial court of Liao. Unfortunately, Song Qingshu was currently too busy to personally go to Shangjing to verify the matter. He could only secretly write a letter and attach a unique secret code between the two of them to the Riyang mansion. He informed Zhao Min of the matter and asked her to first go to Shangjing to verify the matter. After all, Song Qingshu wasn't just living for himself anymore. He had to be responsible for the lives and futures of a large group of people. He had a series of things to deal with in the Jin Kingdom, and he had been in the Jin Kingdom for a long time. He didn't know how the Golden Snake Camp was doing. Also, Li Kaxiu, who was in charge of the 100,000 Green Camp, had sent Jiao Waner and Audiobook there. He didn't know how things were going, so he had to find time to see for himself. At this time, he couldn't help but rejoice that he had found several capable and beautiful confidants. Dongfang Muxiue was in charge of the Qin Kingdom. Xia Qingqing and Audiobook were in charge of the Golden Snake Camp, and Su Quan and Feng Yi were in charge of the Divine Dragon Cult. If it weren't for their help, he probably wouldn't have been able to accomplish so many things even if he didn't sleep or rest. Sometimes, Song Qingshu even had some infuriating ideas, such as learning from the lions of Africa, building a large harem, and then letting the harem conquer the grasslands. Song Qingshu laughed awkwardly and collected his thoughts. Instead, he thought about an urgent problem. He could not stay on the Jin Kingdom's side forever. After he left, who should he send to take care of the situation here? Empress Pei Man was originally an excellent candidate. She was both capable and experienced. If he really left it to her, she would definitely be able to manage the Jin Kingdom well. But unfortunately, Empress Pei Man was also a person with a strong desire for power. Their cooperation was at most taking what they needed, and it was difficult to say that they had any real feelings for each other. If he dared to entrust the Jin Kingdom to her, the Jin Kingdom would probably be completely out of his control in a few months. Song Qingshu was well aware of all this. Originally, the best way to deal with Empress Pei Man was to kill her with a borrowed knife. He could use Wan Yanxi's knife or kill her on the night of Wan Yan Liang's coup d'etat. In history, Empress Pei Man was killed by Wan Yanxi. However, Song Qingshu was not a cold-blooded and heartless person. He couldn't do such a cruel thing to a woman who was intimate with him, but he also wouldn't ignore the potential threat because of his personal feelings. So he used Wan Yan Liang's hand to wipe out her influence inside and outside the palace. Now, she was only left with the status of empress, and it was difficult for her to have the opportunity to control the court like before. Compared to Empress Pei Man, Gubai was much more trustworthy. Now that her husband, Tang Quobian, was dead, and they had been together for a period of time, their feelings and interests were firmly tied together. However, Gubai was too gentle and kind, and it would be difficult for her to handle the complicated court affairs. As for Pucha Eliho, she had endured for so many years and even succeeded in getting rid of Wanyan Zongan. She was indeed a very capable woman. However, his relationship with her mother and daughter was not close enough for him to entrust them with such a large business. Oh, there was also Madame Tang. Ah, a vase should have the self-awareness of a vase, not to mention she was someone else's wife. How could he get her to do things for him? Song Qing-shu had a headache thinking about it. He couldn't think of a person who could have the best of both worlds. In the end, he could only give this heavy responsibility to Goodbye for the time being. With Wan Yinping's help, and Pucha Eliho and Empress Peiman's help, she should be able to manage. A few days later, the imperial court approved the request from the Ministry of Justice. Wan Yinliang was publicly executed on the charge of treason. Song Qing-shu did not go to see the execution. He did not even go to see the mother and daughter of Chong Jie and Gobai. In any case, they had already taken their revenge in the imperial palace. Song Qing-shu silently watched as Gobai and Wan Yinliang paid their respects to Tang Quobian and then told them of his plans to leave. "What, you're leaving?" Gobai exclaimed. As soon as the words left her mouth, she realized that her reaction was a little too big. She carefully glanced at her sister and found that she was also a little absent-minded. Song Qing-shu smiled bitterly. "I've already wasted too much time in the Jin Kingdom, and there are still many things waiting for me to deal with in other places, especially Li Kashio in the Jianghuai region. But what about the situation in the court if you leave?" Wan Yinping suddenly asked. Right now, they were relying on him to pretend to be Wan Yin Ruo. Once he left, how could the truth of Wan Yin Ruo's death be hidden? Chapter 946. Gobai and Wan Yinping took the masks and put them on. Song Qing-shu walked forward and gently smoothed out the wrinkles on the masks so that the masks would be closer to their skin. With his hand caressing their faces, both Gobai and Wan Yinping felt a bit uncomfortable. If they were alone with him, it would have been fine, but now that they were in front of another sister, it was a bit embarrassing. Fortunately, their masks blocked the embarrassment on their slightly burning cheeks. After Song Qing-shu helped them put on the masks, the two girls raised their heads and saw each other's faces clearly. They jumped in fright. Ah! They quickly pointed at the masks on their faces. This is Song Qing-shu nodded his head and said, "That's right. This is Wan Yinshi's mask. Since you are his biological brother and sister, your facial features are somewhat similar. This mask is easier to make. Let's disguise ourselves a bit more. In addition, Wan Yinshi's body is weak and sickly, and the two of you are tall and slender. With a little disguise, it shouldn't be a problem to deceive others. In a while, I will leave behind the mold used to make the mask and tell you the recipe for the material. You can also make it yourself, just in case." After the initial shock, the two girls finally calmed down and became curious about the mysterious masks. Gobai touched his younger sister's face. Looking at his younger sister, standing there like the deceased Wan Yinshui, he couldn't help but sigh. "No wonder I didn't recognize you at all when you disguised yourself as Wugu Ci. This is too amazing." "It's not as magical as you think," Song Qing-shu said with a wry smile. "This disguise can only deceive some unsuspecting people, and it can easily be seen through by close relatives. Didn't you recognize me before?" Gobai took off her mask and heard his words. She couldn't help but blush. "How can it be so easy to see through? When I was being intimate with you, I had already sensed that something was wrong. But I didn't think too much about it. Who knew that there was such an amazing skill in this world? It was only after you revealed some flaws that I realized that you could be an imposter." Wan Yinping also took off her mask. Hearing her sister's words, she couldn't help but say gloomily, "Sister, you and brother-in-law have been married for so many years, but you can even get brother-in-law's physical characteristics wrong. Even I was tricked by this person." Gobai touched her cheeks and felt a burning sensation. She couldn't help but retort, "Humph. If you didn't have ulterior motives toward your brother-in-law, how could he have taken advantage of you? Besides, after you knew he was fake, didn't you still?" This time, Wan Yinping and Song Qing-shu returned to the capital together, and the two of them cooperated so well. How could the attentive Goodbye not know what happened between the two of them? Ah! Wan Yinping screamed and quickly tickled her sister. Don't say it. Seeing the two sisters fight, Song Qing-shu naturally enjoyed watching from the side. Occasionally, their clothes would be torn, which made people's imaginations run wild. Soon, the two sisters discovered Song Qing-shu's sinister intentions and had no choice but to stop fooling around. Goodbye tidied up her messy clothes and hair, while Wan Yinping was much more natural. She asked, "It doesn't matter if we look alike, our voices." Song Qing-shu smiled slightly. "Don't worry about that. I'll teach you a way to change your voice. Although it's hard for you to reach the level where you can impersonate anyone in a short amount of time, it shouldn't be a problem to just learn Wan Yinping's voice. Hey, if you want to talk, then talk. Why are you holding our hands?" Wan Yinping was stunned. Song Qing-shu said seriously, "Of course, this kind of secret technique has to be learned in a secret place." Wan Yinping thought that was true and was intimidated by him. On the other hand, Goodbye knew him better. Looking at the direction in which they were walking, she suddenly had a bad feeling. "Your so-called secret place isn't the bed, is it?" Song Qing-shu suddenly had a shocked expression. "So we're thinking of the same thing." "Bah!" Goodbye spat with a red face. "Who's thinking of the same thing as a pervert like you?" "What pervert?" Song Qing-shu hurriedly corrected her. "This method of changing voices is an extremely high-level kung fu. I don't know how many martial arts masters want to learn it, but I won't teach them." Wan Yinping finally reacted. She couldn't help but be embarrassed and angry. "Don't think that we don't know what you're thinking. Let go. Don't look at an upright and great person like me with that kind of vulgar gaze." Song Qing-shu puffed out his chest. "I really want to teach you kung fu." Wan Yinping couldn't help but kick him. "Don't think that we're easy to fool like a 3-year-old. Before she could finish, her toes were numbed by Song Qing-shu's protective jinchi. She couldn't help but suck in a cold breath. Song Qing-shu said with a lonely expression, "I'm about to leave Jing City. I don't know how long this separation will be. Don't you want to talk to me before I leave?" His tone was extremely sad. The two sisters looked at each other and saw that the other couldn't bear it. Goodbye hesitated and said, "You can talk, but later you can't touch me." "Of course, no problem." Song Qing-shu was instantly overjoyed. He hurriedly pulled the two women into the inner room. Not long after, the sisters' exclamations came from inside. "Aren't you teaching kung fu? Why do you need to use your mouth?" "Of course I need to use my mouth to change voices. But what's with your hands that are everywhere?" "I'm opening up your 8 extraordinary meridians." A few days later, the emperor issued an imperial edict. In view of the expansion of the Golden Snake Camp, the territory of Li Kaxiu, the admiral of Jiangxia of the Qing Kingdom, had become a piece of fat meat in the eyes of various forces. The emperor sent Tang Quobian, the admiral of Jiangxia, to visit Li Kaxiu in Yangzhou. The original border between the Qing Kingdom and the southern Song dynasty was the upper reaches of the Huai River and the lower reaches of the Yangtze River. The Qing Kingdom controlled the Huainan East Road and the northern part of Jiangsu, while the southern Song dynasty controlled the Huainan West Road and the southern part of Jiangsu. Li Kaxiu was nominally the admiral of Jiangxia, responsible for the defense of Jiangsu and Zhejiang, but he actually controlled the Huainan East Road and the northern part of Jiangsu. The admiral of Zhejiang was just an imitation of the ancient system. When the Qing Kingdom was defeated, the Golden Snake Camp rose up. Its sphere of influence happened to cut off the Qing Kingdom's territory. After that, the Qing Kingdom had to choose to stop the war with the Golden Snake Camp. Although Li Kaxiu had always claimed to be loyal to the Qing Kingdom, people with discerning eyes could see that the Qing Kingdom could no longer control this territory. Therefore, various forces tried their best to win Li Kaxiu over. This time, when Song Qing-shu left Daxing Prefecture under this name, it did not arouse the suspicions of the court officials. However, at the same time, the minister of Shanshu brought up the issue of the Chongyang sect. Last time, because Song Qing-shu, Pu Cha, and Ahu returned to the capital, this matter was interrupted. This time, when Tang Quobian left the capital, The relevant officials suggested that he go to the Chongyang Palace. Song Qing-shu could not think of a reason to refuse, so he agreed. Chapter 4. The end of the journey to the Jin Kingdom now. There are 18 chapters left. In view of the recent plots, such as Pucha's Ollie Tiger taking revenge on Wanyan Liang in the laundry yard, or teaching the Jebi sisters Kung Fu, there's a lot of room for development. I have decided to occasionally use related foreign chapters to replace the chapters. I think there should be no objections to having a foreign chapter replace a chapter. The foreign chapters will be placed in the V group of this book. How to join the group. The V group is only for readers of Zongheng. Fans of Zongheng who have a young hero value or above must add Q. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.